Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 5:30, and I will call this regular meeting of the Burnsville City Council to order. It is our tradition to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is announcements, and our announcements have to do with all of our upcoming meetings. Regular council meetings are scheduled for Tuesday, February 4th at 5:30 p.m. and Tuesday, February 18th at 5:30 p.m. We also have work sessions scheduled Tuesday, February 11th at 5:30 p.m. And we have a closed work session on Tuesday, February 4th at 6 p.m. And this is for the city manager's annual review. We also have an all-day work session scheduled for Friday, January 31st at 9 a.m. All meetings are held here in the council chambers except for the all-day work session, and that will be at the Nicollet Inn boardroom at the Nicollet Inn. Yes.
Madam Mayor, clarify the meeting will start at 8:30 on the 31st, yes. Not 9 a.m., 8:30 a.m.
So the meeting, the all-day work session is at 8:30 a.m., not 9 a.m.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. The next item is citizens' comments. This is the opportunity for anyone in the audience to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not in application form that will be coming before us at a future date. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda for tonight and not an application form that will be before us at a future date? Anyone? Seeing no one, we will move on. The next item is additions to the final agenda, and this is for emergency items only. Ms. Mescali, are there any emergency items?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Members of the council, do you have any emergency items? Okay, thank you. The next item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda is a group of items that's considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. However, an item on the consent agenda can be removed for a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes an item on the consent agenda to be removed for a separate discussion and vote? Anyone? Ms. Mescali?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Members of the council? May I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Workman makes the motion, second by Councilmember Schultz. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Thank you, and the motion carries. The first item on the regular agenda is a public hearing. And this is a resolution ordering the improvement, approving the plans and specifications, and ordering the advertisement for bids for the 2020 street improvement northeast area, and to authorize the joint bid with 2020 concrete elements, rehabilitation, and signal modifications. Presenting is Mr. John Schmeling, our Assistant City Engineer. Mr. Schmeling, good evening.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm here before you tonight for the items 5A and B, which are public hearings for our street improvements northeast area, contract 20-101, as well as the west area, contract 20-102. I'll be running you through just an overview of the improvements we're proposing, our improvement strategies, the schedule, proposed funding, special assessment methodology, and then a little bit about project communication. After that, then we'll jump into just a few specifics on each contract, any unique items, show you some condition photos, and then talk about estimated costs, and then hold the public hearings. This year, we're proposing a wide variety of street improvements in the northeast and west area of the city. Northeast area consists of the Travelers Trail area, North Highway 13 frontage road, Lark Industrial Boulevard, River Hills Drive, Happy area, and Parkwood Drive / 12th Avenue. The west area consists of Hennon Road area, Forest Glen area, Dakota Place area, 141st Street, 143rd Circle, and Nicollet Court. This table shows kind of just an overview of the street improvement strategies we do. We are proposing this year to do all reclamation and rehabilitation. Reclamation is essentially full depth pavement replacement, partial curb replacement, and then we also do sanitary sewer repairs and storm sewer repairs and upgrades. And then for rehabilitation, generally we just replace the top 2 inches of pavement, sometimes a little more depending on the street condition. Still do partial curb replacement, and then we still do sanitary sewer repairs. All of these different strategies we're proposing would also have associated sidewalk repairs and the Americans with Disabilities Act upgrades, miscellaneous tree removal, and we will evaluate all the streetlights in these areas to see if any warrant replacement. The schedule for the street improvements is we held a neighborhood meeting back in November. I didn't put this on here, but in December you guys approved the preliminary report. Tonight we're holding the public hearing on the proposed improvements. In March, we'll be awarding contracts, and I just want to point out that is sooner. We're doing that sooner this year to try to get ahead on some of the bidding climate's been really tough lately, so that's why you're getting this hearing sooner than you're used to, and we'll be awarding contracts a month sooner than in the past. And we plan to continue to do this going forward. We'll hold a pre-construction open house in April prior to starting construction. We'll have April to October construction season. In August, we'll mail final assessment letters and hold a final assessment hearing in September. Funding for these improvements comes from a variety of sources, including taxes, special assessments, utility funds, municipal state aid funds, and for a signal modification proposed to be bid with this project, Dakota County will be contributing towards that. So moving on to our special assessment methodology, we are proposing assessing on a frontage basis based on the frontage measured 30 feet back from the front property line. And the assessment rates are set based on street widths for residential, multifamily, and other. Each rate is set based on a certain street width for each of those categories. It's based on assessing 40% of the street cost. What we don't assess for with these projects are utilities, 60% of the street work, and any other work being included with the projects. We set the frontage rate based on the past 3 years' average cost, and we set those rate per foot yearly. This is an excerpt from actually our fee schedule, which states the rates. This is all reclamation and rehabilitation. Again, we have rates for single family, multifamily, and other as shown for reclamation and rehabilitation. Also of note, rehabilitation is a much simpler strategy, so hence the lower rates for those than the reclamation. Assessments can be prepaid in full by November 15th. I should change that within, so November 15th of 2020 is where they need to be prepaid. Otherwise, if they're not prepaid at that point, they would be spread on the taxes over a period of years at a 4.5% interest rate. I left this slide in here. This was done for 2016, but just showing that there are some other cities that do assess, and our assessments generally are quite competitive as far as they're at or below what other cities are assessing. And we at some point soon will probably study this again, but just showing you that. For project communication, our main way of communicating is through our website at burnsvillemn.gov/roadwork. We have individual pages for each of the each of the contract areas, where we post almost weekly updates during construction, as well as any other relevant information that the public might want to see. We also have on our roadwork page a notify us form for people to use to let us know if they have irrigation, invisible fence, let us know if they've had any drainage issues, sewer issues. And then one of the big things with that is it gives them that opportunity to let us know if they have any special access needs, for whether it be for medical or special events. And we let the contractor know that and do our best to accommodate those needs as feasible. In addition, as I said before, we have our website, as well as an email for construction questions, construction@burnsvillemn.gov. We also have an email for assessment questions, assessments@burnsvillemn.gov. And then lastly, we do have email notification subscriptions available for the different contract areas. So this concludes kind of more of the general scope for all of our different project areas. Now I will move us into talking about item 5A, which is contract 20-101. Again, this area has Travelers Trail area, North Highway 13 frontage road, Lark Industrial Boulevard, River Hills Drive, Happy area, and Parkwood Drive /12th Avenue. Some items unique to this contract, other than the general ones I've already covered, are first, in the rehabilitation areas, there are 3 spots we do plan to do full depth milling and repaving. We're doing that on Windsor Court, Crown Hill Court, and then 1 section of Travelers Trail from Stratford Lane to Parkwood Drive. It's so deteriorated we need to repave. Next would be the 2020 signal modification. That's been brought before you for authorization as a separate project previously, and we're proposing joint bidding that with this contract. What that consists of is modifying the signal at Cliff and River Hills Drive to have flashing yellow arrows on it to help with off-peak traffic movement. Another thing we're doing is we're going to be adding a couple since we're restriping with these projects, we're going to add a couple of turn lanes on 12th Avenue at Riverwoods, so we got plenty of room to do that. And then Parkwood Drive, just south of 13, we're adding a turn lane to some of the apartments there, again, because we have the room to do it, and it'll add some safety. Also, we're planning to do some pedestrian crossing enhancements on the frontage road. There's a pedestrian crossing. We'll be adding additional signage as well as crosswalk striping to that. It's not directly in front of the high school, but it is kind of where the frontage road turns there, by kind of across from Burger King. Also, and I'm going to go into this a little bit deeper in my next slides, but we're proposing on Travelers Trail from Eagle Ridge Drive to Parkwood Drive, doing the new striping with dedicated on-street bike lanes. And then lastly, we are proposing joint bidding with the 2020 concrete elements rehab. This is actually something you saw last year. We had proposed some concrete repairs at the intersection of Eagle Ridge and Travelers Trail. We got bids for it, even we're gonna move forward with it, but we got a suggestion from the contractor to maybe look at a couple different options for it. We had proposed cut out the bad areas and replace option, but there were so many that needed it that we're gonna try doing a alternate bid where we do either piecemeal or just replace the colored concrete and put in wider joint spacing. So we wanna see if that would be more economical. So that's why we're proposing rebidding that with this, and then we're proposing it with this project because we already have traffic control for the adjacent street improvements. As promised, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the Travelers Trail proposed on-street bike lanes. To start off, this map is just an excerpt from a 2018 multimodal study that we had a consultant work with us to do. And we're proposing implementing dedicated on-street bike lanes on Travelers Trail from Eagle Ridge to Parkwood Drive. Other items of note, there's a future Orange Line station planned on the southeast corner of Nicollet and Highway 13, as well as just noting the heart of the city location. So we're proposing these on-street bike lanes because if you look at this map, on the north side of 13, we've got a dedicated mixed-use trail already in place. South of 13, in terms of east-west access, there really isn't anything except for our regular narrower sidewalks. And then there's potential to put bike lanes on Travelers Trail to kind of help facilitate the bike traffic and allow for safe biking. And that would be useful for access to the future Orange Line station. It would connect up with the wider sidewalks in the heart of the city that are basically, they're sidewalks, but they're of a width that they're basically like a decorative trail. So we are proposing these dedicated lanes. Some of the benefits, other than what I've already said, include that we utilize complete streets principles. They're cost effective because we're already erasing all the striping with the road project. They utilize the wide streets. Again, they connect to the heart of the city, and they can help with access to the future Orange Line. And in the future, they could be extended whenever we do road improvements on 122nd to get all the way from heart of the city to the trail that is on County Road 11. I will also add too, I have been in contact with Minnesota Valley Transit Authority. They do operate the 444, which I believe goes to Mall of America. It's their busiest route is on Travelers Trail. Still working with them. They are in support of the bike lanes, as it does help with their buses. Their buses all have
Bike racks.
So. And then just to show you, there's the two different segments that would modify. First, Travelers Trail from Eagle Ridge to Portland currently is a 4-lane road with no parking. Well, no allowed parking. And we're proposing converting it to a 3-lane with center turn lane with dedicated bike lanes in both directions, as well as a dedicated 8-foot parking lane on the south side. With that, I would mention we did have a traffic count done, and with the level of traffic on this segment, it's 3,000 cars per day, which definitely is in the range to warrant a 3-lane versus a 4-lane segment. And then also of note with this is we're actually adding the parking lane, which you can park there now if you're not, if you want to, but this would make a safe spot for parking that's not currently there. And then the other segment, which is Travelers Trail from Portland to Parkwood, currently is 2 lanes with basically parking lanes on both sides. We're proposing converting it to keep it 2 lanes, do dedicated bike lanes, and then limit parking to the south side. So that would be, being honest, it would take away parking from the north side. You'd retain it on the south. We have done some outreach on this. Back in December, we sent out a mailer to approximately 300 adjacent residents and businesses, as well as held an open house in December, pushing the people to take an online survey. And then in January, we had communications push it out with social media and email notification to the general public to also take the survey. As of January 12th, there had been 76 respondents. About 40% were supportive of the change, 30% approximately were against, and about 30% were kind of neutral, didn't really have a strong opinion. We also asked some questions about utilization. About 50% of the people that responded said they would use the bike lanes at least once a year or more. If you're looking at it from would I use it once a month or more, 20% said that. We also asked about parking. 40% of respondents said that they would use parking at least once a year or more. Looking at it from the once a month or more, that goes to 20%. And then about 50% identified themselves as novice or recreational bikers. And as I said before, I did talk to MVTA, and they are in support of this change. So with that, given that there wasn't over 50% support, the staff recommendation is to proceed with installing the bike lanes as proposed, evaluate them over the next several years, and if safety issues occur, remove the bike lanes with a future seal coat or maintenance paving. And that would be really only if we're seeing real safety things occurring. You know, if a couple people don't like the bike lanes and there's not really a safety issue, we probably wouldn't recommend removing them. But if we are seeing issues, we would recommend reverting back to what it was or something else different. So with that, I'll move on to show you some before pictures of these streets. I'll run through them quickly.
Okay. I think we have some questions here from members of the council. Councilmember Gustafson.
Yes.
You said we plan on taking this lane to eventually connect with the one on 11?
Yes.
What does that do for us as far as biking in the city?
Well, it provides, so currently on 122nd and Travelers Trail, which kind of goes that whole stretch, currently we just have 5-foot sidewalks on each side. So by putting the bike lanes, it kind of dedicates a place for bikers to go to. We're hopeful that that would take some of the biking off of the narrow sidewalks and put it on the street and give them a striped, a little bit safer condition.
Just as a follow-up, once we hit 11, where does that take us once we hit 11?
Once you hit 11, well, you can go north or south, and then actually in the spring we'll be finishing our striping on River Hills Drive from Cliff to 13, which is dedicated bike lanes, which then in conjunction with the County Road 11 trail gives you a full connection all the way up to the trail on Cliff, the off-street trail by 13 that's north of 13. So it kind of completes the loop. So it would be beneficial if we're not seeing issues with these bike lanes to make that extension so you get that full connection between Heart of City, Highway 13 and County Road 11.
Just one more follow-up,
Yeah.
Mayor.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at our heart of the city. It's a high-density area. It's going to become even more high-density. I'm assuming there's going to be more biking there. And so I'm assuming there's going to be good connectivity between the heart of the city And are there bike trails in some of our neighborhoods? Because right now, I don't think there's but sidewalks to get into the heart of the city if you want to
Yep.
bike into it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Schultz?
So you said if there are safety issues, not just a preference issue, then the striping would be removed, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. My question to you is, are there safety issues, not preference issues, now? Concrete safety issues now?
I wouldn't necessarily say that. There have been some people that have said, well, are you sure you want to put people on the streets biking? So, but I wouldn't say I feel like that's a super concrete safety issue.
So you're saying there's a preference issue now? Because we don't have a safety issue now. In the same way that you would judge a safety issue
Oh,
for
yeah.
removal.
Yes. And we're proposing these lanes, another reason that we're proposing them, but, so I said cost effective. So with these, it cost us about it would cost about $15,000 to add the extra striping and signage it would take to do this 3/4 of a mile proposed on-street bike lanes. If we were to, say, ever want to do off-street trails, those cost about $1 million a mile, so that'd be about $750,000. So we feel that this is a good way to utilize the wide street we have for a fairly minimal cost. The whole project cost of just the Travelers Trail project is about $1.5 million. So we just feel it's a good investment of a relatively small dollar amount.
Okay, yes, Councilmember Schultz?
So, looking at this and seeing what they're experiencing in Minneapolis and the accidents they are having there, why are we choosing to have parked cars, bike lane, and traffic? Because Minneapolis is starting to zero in on, maybe that wasn't a good idea.
See, one thing I would argue is that Minneapolis is a much higher density with
Absolutely.
a lot more traffic. This is a lot lower traffic. The 3,000 cars per day is quite low. Now, to be honest, I don't know what Minneapolis traffic ends up being, but relatively low traffic. And when you do have some of the mix of the bikes and these lanes, it will have somewhat of a traffic calming effect. So even just converting that 4-lane to a 3-lane can help with traffic calming as well, in addition to putting the bikes into their proposed lanes.
Okay, and I ask that because I do have concerns about when you sandwich the bike lane in
Between the
between
park.
parking and a bike lane, and then you have lanes of traffic. That I mean, frankly, I'm uncomfortable with that. If we're going to do that and we're gonna do the money, and I do realize that Minneapolis has a lot more traffic. Definitely, they do have a lot more traffic. But seeing what they're experiencing with that, also talking with biking advocates and what they're experiencing, I'm not sure if that's the way to go or not.
Let me follow up with, do we have any bike lanes, dedicated bike lanes on street in Burnsville today?
Not really yet. So right now, we've got River Hills Drive kind of halfway there. That's going to get finished in the spring. And then we are moving forward, and that's already been awarded, Lac Levant Drive from County Road 46 to 42.
Yeah.
And that'll be a similar idea, same thing with parking on one side and dedicated bike lanes in 1 lane each direction.
So you're proposing this because we're doing reconstruction in this area?
Yeah, it's because we're doing rehab. If I could have it my way, I wouldn't necessarily rush it to here, but because we're erasing the striping, it's the cheapest point to do this. If we were to do it later, then we have to pay to remove all the striping that would already be out there. And so if you're gonna do it, now would be the time to do it. Otherwise, if you wait, we would have, if we did wanna do it in the future, we'd have to remove the striping. So it's an opportunity to do it, and that's why we're proposing it now, because it'll be at the lowest cost.
Okay. Portland, from McAndrews down to, going south to 42. That was a 4-lane, and it is now a 3-lane with a 2-lane with a turn. And then you have parking that is also, that lane is used for bikes, correct? It's not a dedicated bike trail, but people use it, because I see it.
Yeah, I mean, they can utilize that area even though it's not bike striped, yeah.
Okay, have we had any conflicts that you know of?
I would defer that question to Ryan. Are you aware of any?
No, Madam Mayor, I'm unaware, so the big difference there is we lose all our parking. What we're trying to do here is provide a place where you can park and have dedicated biking lanes. On Portland, you basically, if a car parks there, then you have to bike around the car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I get it. I'm just trying to understand what we do have in the city and what you're trying to do now, because it appears to me that you're moving towards complete streets
Yes.
methodology.
A second.
And when you're doing reconstruction is when you're saying, while we're here doing this, let's look at a bike trail.
Correct.
But I also understand what, because in Minneapolis, and I think it's Portland, when I go down to St. Mary's and I'm coming back and I have to take a left to go south, you have that same configuration where you have the 2 lanes, you have a bike trail, and it is kind of, especially at night for me, to make that right turn and you're turning right into a bike lane while you're making that right turn to catch 35W going south. Yeah, so I get what you're talking about, Councilmember Schultz, but I'm trying to understand what we have in the city. Have we had any conflicts? Because I think Williams Drive is another one that we have. We had 4 lanes and took it down to 2, and a turn lane, and then you also have, and I don't know.
We've had good luck with the 4-lane to 3-lane conversions
Yeah,
in the past.
Yeah.
This is attempting to get us to a more multimodal environment.
Yeah.
We do get people asking for this kind of thing.
yeah,
and,
because I see some bikes on Williams Drive.
Yeah, that's, Williams Drive would be a lot better example to Portland
Yeah,
than Traverse Trail. Much less traffic there for sure.
yeah. Okay. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I live on Travelers Trail right in that area, and one of the things I like about going to 3 lanes is slowing down traffic. I just, a few days ago, was walking my dog, and someone was going what appeared to be 70 or 80 miles an hour going westbound toward the intersection. They were coming, down, and it's a bumpy ride right now because the road condition's pretty bad. And I hollered, slow down, and did this, but they went past me so fast they probably never saw me. So I would like to see some mitigation of the traffic there. And there's a park right across the street, and there's all summer long there's a lot of kids going in and out of there too. I'm a fan of getting bikes off streets and on 10-foot wide trails, and that's why I like the trail system that is essentially a replacement to the sidewalk, but it makes it wide enough to handle bikes and walkers. I visited a lot of cities, and I'm working with the NLC on multimodal and micro-mobility, and we're talking about, scooters, and scooters are, basically every city I've gone to that I've ridden a scooter, they make it very clear you're not allowed to be on the sidewalk. They're basically forcing scooters to use the streets.
Yeah.
I have yet to find more than a few people ever be in the street. Everyone rides on the sidewalk. And so really, what people are saying is, it's too dangerous for me to ride a scooter in the street. I'd rather ride on the sidewalk, even though they're navigating pedestrians, and that's creating friction and problems. They just don't want to. They don't want to get out in the street. And I think it's a lot the same for bikers. It's just nerve-wracking to ride a bike with 35 mile, even 40, or even 70 in this guy's case, mile per hour traffic flying by you. It feels intimidating and unsafe. And so, as much as I am a fan of being able to use our streets where we have the width and there's low traffic, it concerns me to move forward with something like this when I would prefer to see the sidewalk on one side or the other just turned into a 10-foot wide path and become part of the trail system that connects with the rest of the trail system that the county is doing and other cities are doing, so we can connect. I get why you're doing it. I just, and maybe this is a test, because as you said,
The other
could
is
end up
cost.
being something that gets
Yeah.
restriped in
Yeah.
3 years
Yeah.
when we.
Because we do plan to do maintenance, which will include crack seal and likely a seal coat in the very relatively near future, maybe 3.
Just one last question. You mentioned the numbers, but I was trying to do the math. This distance that we're doing on-street bike lane versus turning the 5-foot sidewalk into a 10-foot sidewalk trail, what's the difference in cost for the mileage that this segment?
Well, so the added striping and signage is 15,000 for this 3/4 mile segment. To add a off-street trail, and I'm kind
Yeah.
of figuring just one, you wouldn't need
Yeah.
both sides to be
It's
that
gonna
way.
be more
just one side.
It'd be
expensive.
about 3/4
Yeah.
using reasonable,
Yeah,
rough
it
numbers.
is. And we saw those numbers. Mr. Peterson?
It's expensive.
I guess I put this up more for previous discussion, but just so you're aware, you, in all clarity, you've approved us to
Yeah.
remove the striping on Lac Lavon Drive from
Yeah.
46 all the way to 42, doing this
Yep.
exact same thing.
Yeah,
So, we're here saying this is the way transportation systems are moving. They're moving towards having folks, do this type of thing on the streets because, for the reasons John brings up, it's very expensive to retrofit trails in where sidewalks are. And now you're using this extra width. I mean, if we were to go back and build this road today, it would not be nearly the width it would be. So we got this extra width at our disposal. And that's the intent here, is to go to a more multimodal, complete streets type of system.
yeah. And with a built-out community, and you're gonna look at a 10-foot trail, we're gonna have to, do we have enough land and an easement to do a 10-foot trail? Just using Traveler's Trail.
For instance, we got federal funding for a 10-foot trail on Cliff Road from.
No, I mean for this, because now if you're taking it off the streets and you're gonna put it on a 10-foot trail, do we have land?
I haven't studied this particular section, but
that's the other
where
part.
we are putting a trail on Cliff Road, we're having to obtain easements.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. You need to get easements.
May I, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay,
May I-
you want to answer that before I go to other
Yeah.
members of the council who have questions?
And I apologize for interrupting.
No.
If you look at this section here for Travelers Trail from Eagle Ridge to Portland, you'll notice that the sidewalks are set back approximately 15.5 feet from the back of the curb. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, I saw that, but I mean, if you're going to do a 10-foot trail around there, you're going to get closer. You're going to, because you have 5 foot right now, you're going to have to go closer to the street to add 5 more feet. Councilmember Schultz?
So you did point out that council had approved putting a bike lane such as this on another street. When council approved that, the conversation was that we would approve that, it would happen, we would study it, and then we would proceed from there. We're now being asked to just go forward when the other one hasn't even been done yet, and I get the cost savings, but I don't agree with the rush. If the agreement was, we do that, we look at it, see how that goes, assess it for the future, if that's the way we go forward or go in a different direction, I'm comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable acting as if we have made this a policy to go forward on. Because as far as I know, we have not voted that this is now our policy for how we're going to handle this.
Okay. Councilmember Workman.
Thank you. John or Ryan, we've got a growing subset of biking enthusiasts in Burnsville, and I think a lot of them have been in contact with people here. And I think they've been a part of a lot of these projects, and I'm not a biker, but what is the perception among those diehards on this particular layout? I mean, just in the conversation we've had to this point, I mean, is among the really commuters, I guess is the word I'm looking for, is this something that's frowned upon, or is this something that they're seeking, or kind of somewhere in the middle? I'm not asking you to speak for them,
Yeah.
but.
Sure.
I'm going to go to Mr. Peterson.
As you know, they've been very active with us on the trail down by the river,
Yeah.
trying to get that.
Yeah.
So there's been other conversations that occurred. I don't know if it's Burnsville Biking, there's a group like that. And when they heard we were evaluating, or saying we're going to evaluate these sections when we do these projects, they were very excited to hear that we were going to take a look at these case-by-case situations.
Okay.
The biking community would most definitely want this, because then they have a place to take their bike, as opposed to, you can bike, whether we have bike lanes here or not, you're free to
They
bike
bike
on
on the road.
So now they have a dedicated place that's
Yeah.
theirs.
Okay.
I guess I'd think about my sister who has a learning disability and can't drive, but does bike that route to Cub Foods often. And I think she would use that lane, and I think would probably make that ride a little bit easier for her than on the sidewalk, and that's kind of where my thought process has been on this. So, thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Keely.
Thank you. I absolutely hear what Councilmember Schultz is saying. I think we're basically proposing a second test area of street before we have the
Would be a
first one
third.
put in.
We've done two. Would be a third.
Oh, the Lac Levon was our
We've done
first.
two.
Lac Levon, and then
Oh, that's right,
North River Hills.
the short segment between Cliff and
Yeah,
13, right?
River Hills.
And
11,
maybe,
11,
I don't know, maybe the solution is going to have to be a combination, because we do have 10-foot paths, trails, in a large area, because we've been building it out over the years to connect with the Dakota County Trail and connectivity to other cities. And so a person can go to Lakeville on a trail, which is made up of 10-foot wide paths and some on-street, I would say not on-street dedicated bike lane, but on-street buffer, where the stripe between the lane striping, there's an extra, what looks like parking, but it's usually just an extra 5 feet or so of a street that is, laned off. So, I'm torn, because personally, I live on the street, I want it to slow down, so we're gonna go to 3 lanes anyway. The question is, do we stick a 6-foot bike lane on both directions and stripe it out right now, which I guess I can't say no to it, because we don't know yet just how much of a safety benefit or issue or feedback it is, because none of them are completed and used in a summertime period of time, because the 13 to Cliff segment is just getting basically wrapped up for this coming summer, right? And Lac Levon is going to be under construction this summer, as well as this one will be under construction, so.
Councilmember Keely, your wife is a biker. Does she bike on the street?
She actually was one of the people who responded to the survey, by the way.
Yeah.
And her concern was, this was just a short segment, that really what she's looking for is, what's the entire trail plan? And this one segment from Eagle Ridge all the way to
11.
County Road 11, basically, is just a small piece of, a distance to ride type of thing. And my response was, this is one segment that puts the puzzle together to connect with other pieces that are already done
Yeah.
and or going to be done, and this one happens to be on street.
And the methodology that our staff always have for things like this is that if they're going to work on a street and rehabilitate or reclaim it,
Yeah.
then it's the time to look at that, do
Agreed.
you stripe it for bikes at this time? It is leveraging the resources, so that's all I'm hearing, what's going on tonight.
It's a piecemeal. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been
And
doing
we
trail
piece-
segments, one segment at a time,
Yeah.
for years
Yeah.
to be able to build out the entire system.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz.
So my question on doing these roads and then studying them and checking if there is improvements in safety, how exactly will we do that when we have 0 accidents? Do we go to negative accidents, and that's how we know that they're safer? What is our measurement?
That's a good question.
'Cause I guess I would say we would look for, are there accidents when there weren't before? Ryan, do you have any?
There might be
Okay.
some metrics that you could find from other cities in terms of bikers and safety. I'm sure there are metrics
When
out
I
there.
had asked the question before on the number of accidents, I believe the accident we had to go back to was something in 1982.
I mean, Minneapolis and St. Paul must have something because they have a lot of bike lanes.
In my opinion, this is more about providing options than saying it's safer one way or the other.
Yeah,
It's just,
no,
it's,
I get it. No, I get it. I get that you're working on a street and you're saying if we're moving towards complete street models,
yeah,
then you're adding it to it and the cost is lower since you're working on the street.
right. I agree with what you said, Councilmember Schultz. The other two are not done yet. The only reason we're talking about it is because we're doing the street project, so
Yeah.
100% concur with that.
Yeah.
And, like John said, my recommendation still is move forward with this, but like how John said, if we wanted to go backwards, we would be able to whenever we did the seal coating. The same thing could occur whenever we do seal coat the road. We could stripe it with the 3 lanes, with the bike lanes at that point as well. So there is, that might be 7 to 10 years out from now, but there's just.
No, I get it. Okay. All right, Mr. Schmeling, you completed with 20-101? Because, I have to hold a public hearing here.
I know, I'm gonna run through some quick pictures, won't take
Okay.
long, then we can get to that part.
Yeah, because you do have another public hearing.
Yeah, luckily a lot fewer items on that one to discuss, but
Okay.
I will move us forward if you're,
Okay, you have some pictures.
yes, and
Okay.
I'll go quick, so in fact, just looking at Eagle Ridge, Travelers Trail, Windsor Court, Crown Hill Court, Travelers Trail, Parkwood, you can see they're all in need of repair. 12th Avenue, Frontage Road, Lark, almost done, 16th Avenue, River Hills Drive, south end and north end.
Well, it looks awful.
Yes, they all do, they all need it, so, all right, then lastly, just parking on this for just a second, for contract 20-101, the overall estimated project cost would be 4.32 million, with assessments being approximately 14% of the total cost. This again reiterates the assessment rates. Then with that, our staff recommendation would be to, after we hold the public hearing, adopt standard resolution ordering the improvements, authorizing the joint bid with the 2 other projects. And then I wanted to make sure you knew before we go into it, to move these improvements forward would take at least 4 affirmative votes. So if this bike lane thing seems like it's kind of,
And we pull it out.
yeah, then
Yeah.
I would recommend
I'm
pulling it so
I'm
that
already
we
there,
can-
Mr. Schmeling. I'm already there.
Just-
If we're going to need to get
Not my
a
eyes.
supermajority, I'll find out which one is the stumbling block. And
Yes.
pull that out.
So then, now we're there for the public hearing for 20-101.
Thank you, Mr. Schmeling. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to the project for the northeast area of our community? Anyone who wishes to speak to that? Yes, please come up and give us your name and address for the record. Right here.
I guess I just wanted to mention that we're looking at this from the viewpoint of the people that are using the street, but we live on Windsor Court, and so
Yeah.
we have to pull out into traffic all the time. And we have buses going by, and we'll have bikers and cars and everything, and it's gonna be a mess.
Okay. Do you see a lot of bikers?
What?
Do you see a lot of bikers in your area? I mean, so you're on Windsor Court and that's, comes right out to Travelers Trail?
Right off of, near Portland and
Yeah.
Travelers Trail.
Yeah,
A fair number, I guess, some on
Yeah.
the sidewalk, some on the street.
yeah, because I live in the area, so I'm just trying to, yeah. That's difficult in different times of the day, because I have to pull onto the parkway also,
Right.
and that's where you pull out.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that's being considered as well as the fact that we're, kind of moving into the new age with the bikes and stuff. I mean, I think that's a great thing, but I don't know that that's the way we should be doing it.
How should we do it?
Pardon me?
How should we do it to accommodate bikers?
Well, ideally, it'd be nice to just have a dedicated area. I guess my concern is that there's going to be buses, I think there's going to be a bike lane between where the buses are on this sidewalk, right?
Now, this is on Travelers Trail,
Yeah.
and you're right off of the, you live in a court, right? Is that Windsor Court?
Yeah, so
Just
we're going to
east
park
of
cars
Portland.
along that one
Yeah,
side.
yeah,
So my concern is just
yeah.
all this stuff going on when we're trying
Yeah.
to pull out
Yeah.
onto the street, either
Okay.
direction, really. So
Okay, very
I just
good.
wanted to mention it because, I mean, I can see some advantages, but I can see some safety issues,
Yeah,
so that's my
yeah.
concern.
Okay, very good. Thank you, because even if we have a bike trail that's off the road, you're gonna have bike trails still through that intersection coming out. So whichever way we do it, it's going to have it, unless you say no bikers. Yeah. Okay. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak to this item? Anyone? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Members of the council, your thoughts? So this is an area that needs to be done. We've seen all of the streets. Are you okay with the streets? And let me talk about the bike lane. Are you in favor of moving forward with the complete street model while we're doing reconstruction at this time, or not? Because if that's a stumbling block, I'd like to move it out and approve the rest of the project. So, Councilmember Gustafson.
Well, as I've been watching this whole thing, I think this is the perfect way for us to connect the heart of the city to the rest of the city as we move forward with that whole TOD area with our transportation-oriented development, which is a big part of what we're all about today here in the city. We're bringing in many market rate type apartments and housing, which is going to change that demographic in the heart of the city, both through age and economic demographic. There'll be a lot of bike riders in that. And so it will connect our people to the Orange Line as well, so you can come from your neighborhood right into the heart of the city and take the bus downtown if that's where you work and you want to play. So is it the best way right now? No, I would like to see the 10-foot lane too, but I don't know that we want to experiment with $750,000 to see if that works out for us. And so I think we could start with this, and as it grows, we can make some changes along the way, because you're absolutely right. If it's not working, well, then we change the stripes on the road. And $15,000 initial cost is a pretty low investment to actually connect the city and be able to tout that we do like bikers in our city, and we want to give them a place to go. So I will support it with the bike lane.
Okay. Councilmember Keely.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If we were to choose tonight not to do the bike lane striping, what would we do with the extra 12 feet?
Probably would defer back to what it was,
Yeah.
but, I mean, we
Yeah.
could talk about other things, but
Could be
that
parking.
doesn't seem like. it
I don't
would
want
fit
4
very
lanes
good.
anymore there. It's too dangerous. They speed too much. I think going to 3 lanes is a great safety mechanism because
Yeah.
it does slow people down. And maybe not because
2
when
lanes
you
and a
just have
turn lane.
wide road, people tend to just go faster, right? Lane striped or not, but I think this with that, we've seen it happen on other streets where a center turn lane and a single lane and a buffer bike lane or parking. Would you just put parking on both sides of the road potentially because there'd be,
You open up a new discussion, any thoughts, Ryan?
Yeah,
we-
Councilman, Mr. Peterson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Yeah, the mayor's example of Portland Avenue did work well. That used to be 4 lanes. It's now 3 lanes with the center, and it's just, you can park, you can ride your bike, but if someone is parked, then you gotta ride your,
Bike
bike
around
around
it.
it. So that is certainly is an option, that it would be better than going back to the 4 lanes.
Yeah, I agree, because it's working well over on Williams Drive, too.
That's a little trickier for biking, there's really high speeds there.
Well, I know,
So I'd like the Portland one better.
yeah. I do too, but I'm looking at what we've done in terms of trying to get to complete street. The speeds on William is a lot higher than Portland, yeah.
And then County Road 11, Dakota County just changed 4 lanes to 3 lanes from like 134th up to 122nd not long ago. So we have another example of that.
Okay. Councilmember Schultz?
So, looking at this, yeah, 3 lanes I think would be appropriate. We could look at some parking. How I'm looking at this is for the bike lane. So staff is already articulating that this is not a proposal for safety. This is a proposal for options for persons. So looking at doing something just for options, if we're going to do something and we're going to spend city funds, I want us to be doing something the right way. And the right way would be to check the streets that we're already going to do in this manner, see how that works, and if that's something that we then feel should be the policy moving forward for how we want to connect our streets, we do it at that time, rather than kind of rushing. And this would be not just another street as a test street. This would be starting to move forward to say, this is the policy of Burnsville of how we will do our streets. This is now normal. This is what we do. And I'm not ready to say that. I also do want to investigate, and I realize that there's extra costs, connecting, if we're going to do bike paths, and we're also going to be planning for scooters, and we're also going to be planning for more persons with mobility issues and those types of things, looking at how we do our sidewalks, and is that something we start to incorporate into our plans going forward in a little more of a measured, coherent way. I don't feel that this is measured or coherent, so I am not ready for this.
Okay. Councilmember Keely?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question. Why is the bike lane always next to the lane of traffic, which means the parked cars are actually more protected? Why isn't the parked cars 6 feet away from the curb and the bike lane run between those parked cars and the curb?
I think it's less apt to get
Yeah.
more
It's
like
the habit.
hindered, that's why. It's because if people, I think it's easier to kind of, okay, let's hug that curb when we park versus, but that's really kind of the premise.
I've been in cities where the car is parked a distance from the curb. Most cities I visit, the bike lanes are right next to the car traffic, right? I mean, this is the norm, but I'm wondering why we're giving such preference for safety to a parked car and not to the people on the bike.
Okay. Councilmember Workman?
I like the idea of bike on this section. I don't, to Councilmember Schultz's statement, think this is our policy on every rehab project that we have moving forward. But given that this touches the heart of the city and what we're trying to accomplish there, this seems to make sense. And then I'm gonna tag on to Councilmember Keely's point about, lane reduction helping speed reduction. And when we talk about parking, I don't see a lot of parking on that section of Travelers Trail very often, just because everything that happens there
Yeah.
is off of Travelers Trail. So I guess where I'm at is I'm okay with this section, but I agree with Councilmember Schultz that
I need to
I
understand
don't
where you're
wanna
at. Are
see
you,
this
because I need
on
4
every-
votes.
I'm okay to proceed with a yes on the bikes on this one.
Yeah.
But also want to make abundantly clear that I don't think we need to see a bike trail on every road, street improvement project we do. I mean, this seems warranted given the circumstances of the HOC connectivity and the bus line.
Okay. So I hear you saying you would support tonight's recommendation from staff for Project 20-101. And I see that Councilmember Schultz, you're a no on the bike. And Councilmember Gustafson, you're a yes. Councilmember Keely,
I'm okay with this,
with this.
because, I think it's minimal cost, but
Yeah.
I'll echo both Councilmember Schultz and Councilmember Workman. I understand why we're doing it. We've been talking about this for years, and we're now doing it. But
And-
now we're also probably able to garner a lot of safety experience, rider experience, pedestrian experience, because we're not the first city to do this.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cities that have converted to complete streets for the last several years, and so there should be some data on safety and also on
Yeah.
biker surveys on, are you using it, or do you feel safe on it, does it work, et cetera. It is a very cost-effective option compared to the 10-foot path, but
Yeah.
I would prefer the 10-foot path. I don't necessarily love the cost. That's expensive.
Yeah. I support the bike trail because of everything that has been mentioned, but the biggest thing is that it leverages our resources. We're doing reconstruction in that area, rehabilitating that street. Striping is less expensive, and if there are issues, you can restripe it, and it's not that much that comes out of your budget to do this. So I think I have a supermajority, so may I have a motion to adopt the recommendation for, to adopt Standard Resolution A4, and we order the improvements and approve the plans and specifications and order the advertisement for bids for the 2020 street improvement for North area, and authorize the joint bid for 2020 concrete elements and the rehab and 2020 signal modification.
Move to approve.
Councilmember Gustafson makes the motion,
Second.
second by Councilmember Workman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
And the clerk has a division of the House. Thank you. Mr. Schmeling, the next item is yours, and it is also a public hearing, and this is to adopt a resolution improving plans and specifications and order the advertisement for bids for the 2020 Street Improvement West area.
All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. This contract consists of Hennon Road area, Dakota Place area, Forest Glen area, 143rd Circle, 141st Street, and Nicollet Court. There are 2 unique items, much simpler than the other contract. One is, again, here, there are a couple spots where we are planning to do full depth milling and repaving on 141st and Nicollet Court. And then lastly, we are proposing on city property at the end of Hennon Road, adding a cul-de-sac for emergency vehicle turnaround, whereas currently we have a dead end with no turnaround of any kind. The rest of the scope is consistent with what I've covered back at the beginning. These are just some of those before pictures. Again, you see a lot of poor streets. And the less poor ones are perfect for rehabilitation. So then jumping to the overall budget, the estimated cost is 2.51 million for this contract, and assessments consist of 19% of the total cost. And again, reiterated here are the rates for reclamation and rehabilitation. And with this one, no joint bidding recommended with anything, so we're just looking to adopt the standard resolution. Again, 4 votes required. And that's.
Thank you, Mr. Schmeling. Do you have any questions for Mr. Schmeling? The streets do need to be done. We're trying to catch up with all the streets. And we only do how many miles per year because of the cost? Yeah. So anyway, thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this particular improvement project? Anyone who wishes to speak? I close the public hearing. Members of the council, your pleasure. I need 4 affirmative votes.
Move to approve.
Second?
Councilmember Gustafson makes a motion, second by Councilmember Workman. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next one is also a public hearing, and this is a Development 2 policy update. This particular item has been discussed in a work session. Ms. Jenny Faulkner, our Community Development Director, is presenting, and this is to adopt the revisions to the Development Tool Policy application. Ms. Faulkner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I won't go through the report in detail, but I do have 2 slides to share with you in the audience. As you said, we've talked about this item probably the last 3 or 4 months. We had a joint session with yourselves and the EDC in October. At that time, you reviewed the existing policy and perhaps what needed to be changed. Then in December, we went into a lot more detail, looked at what's out in the marketplace, what other cities have, looked at what Roseville has, theirs was most recently updated. And as part of that discussion, the direction was to continue to allow spec buildings as part of our development tools policy. Wanted to allow it for retail, since retail is often part of blight or redevelopment, remove the references to bonds, and we included language that it meets better or best in our architectural guidelines. The proposed policy before you updates a 25-year-old policy application. It hadn't been looked at since the late 90s. It's much more clear, it's much more concise, and it certainly includes your policies and directions. So with that, asking that you hold a public hearing before you adopt the new policy.
Okay, any other questions for Ms. Faulkner? Thank you for including the bond thing, you know how
I do know how.
Only.
I'm catching on after all these years.
Not using public money on,
Correct.
okay, thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Members of the council, your pleasure.
Motion to approve?
Councilmember
Or
Ward.
do we have to have a public hearing?
Yeah, I only need 3 votes. This is a simple majority.
Oh, we just had a public hearing, sorry. Bring-
Yeah, I already,
My motion
I
stands.
already opened and closed it. So are you
Yes.
making a motion to?
I will second.
And Councilmember Workman makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keely. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And
Correct the
motion
record, that was Councilmember Gustafson on the second.
Okay, thank you. And then the next item is the application for Northland Real Estate Group for rezoning from R1 one-family residential to mixed PUD, mixed-use planned unit development, a preliminary and final plat of a 2-lot commercial subdivision known as the Retreat on Crystal Lake, a concept and development stage PUD, a variance for setbacks and building height, conditional use permit for improvement of surface coverage and grading in steep slopes, for an apartment building to be located at 15309 Maple Island Road. We're asked to approve a rezoning, a preliminary and final plat, a concept and development stage PUD, a variance and a CUP, and to adopt the findings of fact and the development contract, PUD agreement and ordinance. Ms. Deb Garros, our city planner, is presenting this evening. Ms. Garros, good evening.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The application that you have before you is not new to the council. You have seen this in various stages over the years. Grace United Methodist Church has been in with several sketch plans over the years, trying to look at a way to develop their property. Last year, you did see a sketch plan and recommended that they proceed forward. There was a comprehensive plan amendment, which was done, and that changed the land use of the site from low-density residential to mixed use. What we're doing for this first application is the rezoning to implement that comprehensive plan change. With the rezoning of the site from R1 single-family to mixed-use and planned unit development, that does require a supermajority of the council for that rezoning application. In terms of the subject site itself, the Grace United Methodist Church properties can include about 6.1 acres of land. There are a couple of encroachments, meaning there are some items that are associated with the church but actually located on city parkland. One in this location, which is basically just fire pit, benches, those types of things. And then also the access to the site is actually within the city park. There's a long history behind that. There's a lot of history for this project that's included in your planning report. So I can address any questions you may have, but otherwise do not intend on going through all of those. In terms of the site plan itself, what is proposed is the existing church remains on the property. The site plan includes using one access, this access that currently goes to the church, and then using that to come into the site, doing a joint parking lot in between the church and the proposed 100-unit senior living apartment complex in this location here. So they are proposing, actually the changes that are shown, there's going to be additional parking lot for the church that is located just to the west of the church. And then they're going to basically take out part of the existing the existing parking lot and then put in additional parking. There's overall about 22 new parking spaces in this particular area, which would be just directly adjacent to the proposed building. The site does meet our standards in the ordinance for vehicles, emergency service vehicles to get through to the area. And the project includes development of both the parking lot areas and the senior building. What I'm showing you now is the grading plan, and this is because with all of the various applications that we're including, one of them that's probably most significant in terms of shoreland or with respect to Department of Natural Resources is related to the city's shoreland ordinance. And the application includes installation of 4 retaining walls, one here adjacent to this new parking lot, one here adjacent to additional parking here, and then one in this location and one in this location. There is also a retaining wall that's proposed to enclose the patio area, which would be available for the residents. In terms of the subject site, you can see that when we have areas where the topography has these lines closer together, it's very steep topography. So in the case of a shoreland district, there are specific provisions that we need to deal with that are related to steep slopes. This green line shows what the top of the steep slopes area are, or the top of bluff. The area in yellow is 20 feet measured 20 feet back from the top of bluff, and that's called the shore impact zone. And nothing really is allowed in a shore impact zone except for stairs, steps, landings, those types of things. And then we have this purple line, which is the 30-foot setback standard, and that's a 30-foot setback from the green top of bluff line. And it's here that the variance for the shoreline district is requested to allow encroachment within that 30-foot setback. Oops, sorry about that. And basically, the areas of the building that are shown in red in this area, here, here, and then a very small part here, encroach up to a maximum of 10 feet into that 30-foot setback. So the variance requested is allowing a 10-foot, up to a 10-foot setback variance from that bluff line. The subject site is proposed to be basically 4 different parcels combined and then divided into 2 pieces. The church will retain the lot to the north, and then the lot to the south, which is somewhat larger, will be sold and developed by Northland, who is the applicant. And what I wanted to note for City Council again is that in this area, the church has additional property, the majority of which is, steep slope area. But the development itself is staying to the north of this line. So they have modified the building location and size quite significantly over the various plans that you've seen, and even since their comprehensive plan. There is no encroachment of the building any longer shown within any of the public park. They have also realigned the building to be a little bit more straight, moved it further to the north, so it's further away from those that bluff area. And now there is not any encroachment within the city park that's proposed as a result. The items, the areas in yellow are part of the subdivision ordinance that requires standard drainage and utility easements to be platted, and this is for all subdivisions, 5 feet along the side lot lines, 10 feet along the front lot lines. There can be additional area if needed. What we're looking at in this case, as a result of the project, the 4 retaining walls are very close to the property line in this location and then also in this location. And rather than having the applicant revise the plans yet again to try to move these retaining walls further to the east and closer to the park, what staff is suggesting is to instead have the applicant apply for a variance from the subdivision ordinance to vacate those drainage and utility easements.
So they're going to have to come back.
Yes, and they are aware of that, and they are amenable to all of the conditions that are recommended. The site, just wanted to note for benefits, there are PUD benefits and deviations associated with the project. They can remove up to 60% of the existing tree cover. They're proposing about half of that, so they will maintain the majority of the tree cover, which basically is around the entire site. You can see how wooded it is. So they are preserving many more trees than they would need to based on the ordinance. For their landscaping, their green space standards are quite a bit higher in all instances than the ordinance standard. And they will be adding another 53 evergreen trees and 100 ornamental or shrub-type trees, the smaller, shorter trees, to the site in addition to shrubs. And I just wanted to call your attention to the majority of the evergreens are proposed in these locations, which will also help to provide additional screening when viewed from the park or adjacent to the park. The one area that does not meet the ordinance is the existing church. Only has 43% of the perimeter of the church is landscaped. church has been there since 1962. It's been added on to a couple of times, but it's a pre-existing condition. And we did include with that, the overall building perimeter landscape is 58% versus the 50% standard when you look at both buildings. But Lot 1, the existing church, is a little bit short, so that is shown as a deviation. As far as the project, it looks very similar to what council has seen in the past. They are looking at a project that kind of emulates or builds upon Buck Hill, kind of a retreat type construction, something that you would find in a wooded area. And they also have the various elevations and building components that are proposed. It does meet the ordinance in terms of all of the standards, with exception in this zoning district, again, because it's a shoreline district, there's a 35-foot height, maximum height standard. The building height is 60 feet overall, and the variance is requested and needed because it's in the shoreland district. You have removed building height requirements like in the mix in other districts, but because this is shoreland, we're dealing with that. So that's a particular variance to the shoreland regulations. The benefits we highlighted in the report. One of the major ones for the shoreline district and for the site in general is that the septic system that the church currently utilizes will be removed, and this will be hooked up to full city sewer and water. They will also install storm sewer. They have three different storm sewer facilities that are located underneath the parking lot. So there will be stormwater management on the entire site where there has not been any up to this date. And then the parcel, the southern lot, will become taxable property. The entire church property is exempt, but when it's sold to the private sector, that will become taxable property. There are also underground existing overhead utility lines. I talked about the overall and the other green space that's exceeded. They're removing about half the amount of trees that they could remove. And they're also removing a non-conforming shed. And they are proposing actually 1.5 levels of underground parking. So with the project, they are exceeding the underground parking standard. It would be typically require 100, they're proposing 129 stalls. The project does, even though they're proposing a joint parking lot, there is enough parking in the project to meet both requirements for the church and for the apartment separately.
And for guests.
Yes. As far as the PUD deviations, I tried to kind of categorize these. It seems that there are a lot. There are a lot. But part of that is really related to the different sections of the zoning ordinance that apply. For instance, in the shoreland district, we don't have any PUD provisions, so we have to file a separate variance and conditional use permit for the building height, for the setback, and then also for the project to exceed 50% impervious surface. They can go up to a higher amount than they are requesting, but that still requires a shoreline CUP, so we included these in the deviations. The orange ones are basically elements that are allowed by the ordinance, but you have to go through CUP or PUD review. So those are the first ones. The yellow, E, F, and G, these are based on the existing conditions of the church. It relates to existing signs, which will be actually platted and located on the adjacent lot. So they need to have easements so they can maintain their signage, and just off-premise signage is another PUD deviation that's requested. Items H and I are two things that I previously referred to. They are deviations to lot area standards, but they're based on the zoning ordinance that has different standards in the mixed district as opposed to in the parking schedule. On another note, the parking schedule will be corrected, so this will no longer hopefully be an issue for the future once we get to that point. And then there are deviations for setbacks, and these I primarily went over. These are usually related to the property line setbacks for the parking lot and drive aisles. There is another setback deviation that's requested, and it's actually item number N. And this is not the shoreline district, but a city standard that when you have a residential building adjacent to a collector street or higher level street, there's an increased setback from 30 feet to 50 feet. And they are requesting a deviation to allow them to be 30 feet instead of the 50 feet back. And then let's see here. Residential density, the overall density of the project meets the mixed district standards. Lot 2 needs a deviation, so we included that with this. However, with a PUD, you can use green space, the density, several kinds of elements can be reviewed based on the entire PUD area, and you're not subject to just the individual lot. So that's what's being proposed in this case. And with that, I'm going to turn this part over to our city engineer, Jen Desrud, to talk about some of the public-private improvements.
Madam Mayor and Council, so this project does have some unique elements in that we are proposing, currently the project does not have sanitary sewer access. And so with our deed host community grant, we're proposing to cost share with the applicant, where the city would, with our grant funds, put in the public force main, and then the private property owner would build a private lift station and connect to it. So then both the church and the new development would have access to the sanitary sewer. The estimated cost for the deed grant funds would be 177 of our 415,000 that we are typically get from that grant.
So we have some left over from the grant if we're only using 177?
Yes, but we have another project. So if our cost estimating is way off, and we exceed the grant, then the developer would be assessed. We don't anticipate that happening, but we have that written into some documents in that just in case. The private lift station we estimate will be about 115,000, and that'd be paid for by the developer, maintained by the developer and owner. We're also proposing to use part of the host community grant and park dedication to pay for a new multi-use trail that would go on the along Maple Island Road. The line in yellow is the existing multi-use trail. It is not all seasons. We aren't able to keep it plowed in all seasons. So this new proposed 10-foot trail would be available all year round. And so we would, that is 750,000. There's quite a few retaining walls needed to build this trail. We would propose using the park dedication from this project, and then the remaining deed host community grant of 238. And then if the costs exceeded both of those funding sources, the developer has agreed to be assessed up to $60,000. If our costs, when we're bidding this, come out differently than we anticipate, then we'd have to reevaluate, but that's where we're at, where we think the costs will come through.
So you're saying that the city will have a benefit with this trail because of this development?
Yes, we will. Yep. The trail will be available to everybody. It's a public multi-use trail.
Well, it's a public park.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is it wide enough for bikes?
It will be,
They're
and
gonna
walks
complete the
and
connection of the
scooters and whatever else
guess
needs
it
to be
is.
on there.
Hovercrafts.
Jeez, why don't we just throw that in the street?
We do have a standard development contract and PUD agreement that goes with any project of this type, but because we're having public improvements that are being constructed by the city using a multitude of funding sources, we have that development contract drafted and already in the developer's hands. Typically, those are recorded at the time that the plat is recorded. In this case, I have a schedule that shows we need to record this pretty quickly to proceed with the deed host community grant. It also specifies maintenance responsibilities. The public improvements are maintained publicly, and that lift station will be a private improvement that will be maintained privately. And then it speaks to the schedule. Back in November, the City Council approved the use of the deed host community grant for these two purposes. The Planning Commission had their public hearing last week. Tonight, we're at the City Council meeting. In order to keep on schedule with the deed host community grant, the developer would need to sign that development contract within 10 days. And then we'll submit our application to deed. They can still deny this, but we've already gotten some pre-approval from them that these are projects that they would support. And then the developer would need to pay their park dedication in mid-March and have their final plat recorded same time, and then obtaining building permits in June with a substantial completion by the end of 2021. So all of these are terms that are in the development contract that are a little different than a typical development because we're using public funds and making public improvements.
Yeah, and this is the reason, I have some questions around all of that, since we're using the deed grant, where usually it's about our infrastructure and making things accessible for potential development. Here, we're using this grant fund for a particular development that's been there, but you're telling us that there are some benefits to the city.
Mm-hmm. I can see a couple of benefits. The multi-use trail is a benefit, and then getting the church off of septic is a big
Yeah,
benefit from our environmental perspective.
Yeah, I see that, because getting that. The other part that, with the contract, so they want it to be senior housing. Does the contract speak to that it has to be senior housing?
I don't.
They're using public funds, and they're, and we want to make sure that that's what they're going to build. And I do know that we don't have control if they sell the building and make it into general rental, because we can't do that. Correct, Mr. Jamnik?
Mayor, that's correct.
I'm trying to cross these Ts as we go along here.
The development contract and PUD agreement describes this development as what they're going to be building. I need to check to see if it specifies senior. It specifies the number of units, a multi-residential.
I think it might be good to take a look at that, since it's a partnership. They're going to use some of our grant funds. Then I think they need to agree, and so that we know, because our citizens are concerned about that. And we'll be hearing from Mrs. Sislo about, do we know that it's going to be for senior housing, or is it going to be general market?
Mayor and Council, we can certainly look at the language.
I think that is something we should do. And I see that you have 33 conditions.
Yes. And Mayor, council members, before we get to the recommendations, there was a neighborhood meeting that was held in November, attended by about 15 people. The application as it now stands is much, I think, far superior to what you've seen in the past. One of the biggest items of contention previously was that they had wanted to take sewer and route that through the park. And we did a lot of study on that. The applicant asked us to study that and paid for a study, and that is no longer part of the application. With that, the Planning Commission did hold the public hearing. They have recommended 4-0 for approval, subject to the 33 conditions that are identified. The information that has been submitted and discussed in general from the public in the neighborhood meetings, I think they feel better in general that the park will not be disturbed, but there are still folks that have issues with being able to see the building from the park or from the lakeshore, and then also the erosion control and how that is proposed to be handled.
And isn't that one of the conditions with regard to the erosion control?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The applicant did state at the public hearing that they would, stated the project would be marketed to active living people, 55 plus, and they will have bylaws mandating residents be at least 55 years old. So that is what is part of the public record related to that.
Good, so they have a declaration and bylaws that speak to that? And that would be part of the contract?
The development contract?
Mm-hmm.
It's not written in the development contract that I saw.
Okay, well, okay, we'll see what staff does. Okay.
With that, the conditions are outlined. Again, the ones kind of in this yellow color are pretty much standard type conditions that you see with most developments. The specific ones are number 1, that's talking about the variance to the drainage and utility easements. They would need to make application for that. Number 2, we would need an access easement to be recorded over that part of the driveway that is within our city park, and that the fire pit and benches that are encroaching be removed or moved back on their private property. Number 7, the septic system would need to be removed. We want that a condition because that is one of the big, I think, ticket items that is positive related to this application. Number 8 is related to noise mitigation, and that will need to be included in construction plans. That is something that was also noted by the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and they do need to meet Minnesota Pollution Control Agency standards, and they have indicated that they will do that and address that condition. Item number 15, an easement will need to be provided allowing Grace United Methodist Church to cross over onto Lot 2, that private property, to access and maintain their signage. And then on this one, the kind of grayed out items are ones that were referred to by our city engineer that are included in the development contract or addressed by this. And the, as far as other things that are associated specifically with the development would be 32 and 33, and those are offered up by the fire department. And they do want to have the hydrants meet their standards to be able to provide fire services, and the water lines to be sized accordingly to meet that. And that's primarily because this building will not be accessible around the entire building, but just 3 sides.
Is that in the contract?
These are conditions
Yeah.
of the PUD, so yes, all of these conditions would be included.
Yeah.
Yep, it would be a joint development contract, planned unit development
Yeah.
agreement. I can stand for questions.
What happens if the developer doesn't meet the goals of the contract? Because it appears to me that you have specific goals about the park dedication, when that needs to be paid, when they need to pull permits and begin. So what happens if that doesn't materialize?
Then the contract is not, it's not.
It's null and void?
Correct.
So what
No, it's-
happens to our money?
So that is the reason why we have such stringent deadlines, so that if the development falls through, we can apply to deed for a new project. And so that would be happening, we'd come to you in your first meeting in April with a new project.
Okay. So you're going to hold them to those conditions of the contract and of the PUD? Okay, because what I'm hearing from you is that there are deadline dates. We have to have that check for the park dedication fee in hand. They have to be, pull permits by June, and so forth. Okay, but if they miss those dates, the contract is null and void?
Correct.
Okay? Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff?
It's good presentation.
Okay. Mrs. Sislo, you wrote that you wanted to speak this evening. Please come forward. And we did get your email, and it's also in the record. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Linda Sislo. I live at 100 Oakshore Drive in Burnsville. I'm here concerned about the project called The Retreat on Crystal Lake for many reasons. First of all, this housing complex is called The Retreat on Crystal Lake. It doesn't include the word senior in it. If this is what the Northland Real Estate Group has intended this property to be, is for seniors, then it should have it in its name. Also, it states that this retreat is located on Crystal Lake. It is not on Crystal Lake. and should not, I repeat, should not include that terminology with it. This proposed property is located on a bluff next to Crystal Lake Park. This project name is very deceptive. In retrospect, it could be called the Senior Retreat on the Bluff. It will offend homeowners who pay hefty taxes for their houses on the lake. Unless they own property on the lake and pay these taxes associated with it, this real estate group should not be allowed to have, quote, on Crystal Lake in its title name. This real estate group states that this 100-unit complex will be for 55 years and up in age. Can they guarantee this in writing? Without this in writing, this 100-unit complex will contain more than 400 people. These units are up to 3 bedrooms. The term they use as den is considered another bedroom and will be used as that. So the 2-bedroom plus den will really be 3 bedrooms and can accommodate up to 6 people per unit. The 1-bedroom plus den will accommodate 4 people. So the average unit will consist of 4 people per unit. Without anything in writing that states that they are 55 and up in rating, it's just word of mouth. This real estate group are great salespeople, remember that. They will say what you want to hear. If you approve this agreement tomorrow, they can exclude the word senior and the age 55 and up to rent to anybody and everybody. Please remember this. Do not let this complex accommodate 4 more renters within 3 acres of land that was zoned originally single family. This proposed apartment complex is exceeding the shoreland variance put forth for the land at 15309 Maple Island Road. It will exceed in height by 25 feet, that's over 2 stories tall. It will exceed in width, extra 10 feet into the city park bluff area. This will cause serious erosion or possibly a collapse in the bluff over time. What happens when it rains 5 to 10 inches, like in California and the houses slide down the hill? This complex needs to be limited to 35 feet tall with no more than 2 stories. Do not let this real estate group pressure you into allowing them to build a 60-foot tall building. It doesn't need to be that tall. It's against the shoreland regulations. We who live on the lake have to follow every rule and every regulation or we get into serious trouble. Don't let this real estate group make their own rules. They must abide by the rules like we who own homes on the lake and near the parkland. Please do not let them ruin our beautiful view of Crystal Lake Park with an oversized, extra-wide complex. Also, this complex is exceeding the amount of units per square feet as allowed in the proposed new zoning mixed use. The maximum number of units should be between 45 to 63 total, not 100 that is proposed. Do not let these salespeople convince you that they need 100 units. They don't. And it certainly exceeds the maximum number of units at 100 for the 3 acres that they are proposed to acquire. Do not let them stomp on us, the city, and make it so easy for them. Please have this real estate group follow all of the rules and regulations and limit their number of units for this oversized building. Only on the southwest side of the church land are trees stated as 56 to 62 feet tall, while this complex is proposed to be 60 feet tall. What about the north, east, and south sides, which are seen from Crystal Lake Park Path, houses located north and south, and from Crystal Lake? This building will protrude so high up in the sky over the trees from the north, east, and south sides, where in the summer and the winter will be an eyesore. The only side that this complex will be as high as is the trees that will face 35W freeway. Everywhere else, the trees are located below the bluff and will now be higher than this complex. You will see this multicolored apartment from all angles other than from the southwest, which is seen from the freeway side anyway. Do not let them build this complex up so high. Keep it to 35 feet tall per the shoreland regulations. Remember, the only reason they want taller is more money in their pocket faster. Do not let this complex get out of control. Keep it no larger than 2-story complex. The colors proposed are so loud. There are 7 different colors and materials on this facility. They should be neutral and limited to one, not a multicolored mess. It should be a brown roof and brown siding to fit and blend in with the nature and church around it. Blues, oranges, and grays of all shades will not fit. It will stand out and be seen miles away. The colors proposed are too many, too loud, and too much for this serene area. Please make them change the colors to a neutral, non-multicolored collage. There will also be 261 parking stalls at this complex. There are 117 right now for the church. That means 261 drivers driving down a single lane frontage road. This Maple Island Road will be lined up for half a mile every day of cars waiting to get onto 160th Street to get onto the 35W freeway to go north to go to work. Remember, these so-called seniors are 55 and probably have a job. They are not sitting at home staring at a church. These cars will block off access to the Speedy gas station, Dunkin' Donuts, and other businesses located there. It will block access to the Maple Island Road and the Maple Island Road intersection. With all these cars lined up and the reverse coming home from work, it will be a mess. They are planning a 2-level below-ground garage for this complex parking. Isn't that going to disturb the natural environment below? Has this been looked into? Won't this proposed underground garage be level with the pathway below and in the city of Burnsville property? Won't this cause serious environmental issues? Won't this cause the buff to corrode faster or just collapse? I don't know. I was just thinking there should be more research done on this matter. Please have the natural environment come first. There will be criminals, juveniles, partiers, drug dealers, and addicts roaming all around the hidden pathways along Crystal Lake Park. The police will be called there continuously, whether at the complex or into the park. The litter will include beer bottles, cigarettes, dog messes. Garbage will be scattered everywhere. There will be drug deals done between Crystal Lake Boat Launch to the Crystal Lake Beach West and its parking lot. It's going to cost the city more money than what they will be receiving in tax benefits from this unit being built, and it will be a waste. It would be nice if the people in the surrounding area would have a say in this matter. We were not given sufficient time to state our opinions or be heard. The only reason 15 people attended November 20th meeting was that there was not sufficient time in advance to attend this meeting. The post date of the letter was November 15th. It was received November 20th by us. In addition, it was only addressed to my husband. I have copies if you'd like to see that. This is not appropriate to have the envelope addressed just to my husband's specific name. Mine's nowhere to be found. Our house is in both of our names. It should be been addressed to residents at or Mr. or Mrs. or both of our names. This is a serious discrimination against myself without sufficient time, within hours of the meeting, and with very serious discrimination with this dreadful apartment complex. They should not be able to break ground. I have a couple concerns for Deb that I was wondering maybe you guys can ask as to a lot of the things in the contracts refer to staff, and I'm not sure as to when she talks about so-called staff, if that's just her or if there's other people in the contract she's referring to, or how many people are in that staff that are approving different things. Also, another question I have would be, they're saying that people have access from this new trail that they're putting on there. In the wintertime, like they're saying, it's not plowed anywhere, it's not plowed that trail along anywhere along the frontage road. So is it only gonna be plowed from this new facility only to Crystal Lake and that's it? Or is it gonna be plowed all the way from Crystal Lake Road all the way over to Maple Island Road? I don't know where it's gonna be plowed. If it's just strictly for the apartment to Crystal Lake Road, it's just for them, it's not for everybody to share. Please do not allow these salespeople from this Northland Real Estate Group to purchase this land. Do not let this real estate group put up an apartment complex for 400 people or more. Do not let them exceed far above the height required by the shoreline regulations. Do not let them build 100 units surpassing the maximum amount. Do not let this complex be able to use, quote, on Crystal Lake when it's not. Do not let them use multicolors all over the building. Do not rush into this project just because of funding. Do not let the Northland Real Estate Group or Deb or anybody force you into accepting this project. It is not right. The Northland Real Estate Group must have something in writing stating this unit is for those 55 and older. They must redesign this apartment to fit within the shoreline regulations. It must be no more than 2 stories tall. It must have between 45 to 63 units. It must be located further than 30 feet from the bluff. It must be a neutral, limited color palette to blend in the natural surroundings. It must change the project name to not include the quote, on Crystal Lake. They must add senior living to the name of their project. They must make sure when they are building down into the precious bluff for their 2-level below ground parking that this is environmentally safe. Safe for the building and safe for the environment which it surrounds. Remember, this unit is already infringing on the bluff way too close. Do not Do not make your decision today. People living near this area need to be informed with a decent amount of time to address all this information. There are too many concerns and serious shoreland variance rules being broken. The land will not be the same. Please take all of this into consideration with your vote. Remember, this Northland Real Estate Group has only one thing in mind. It's how much money they can make as fast as they can make it in the cheapest and shortest amount of time. It's about getting the biggest bang for the buck. They are great salespeople and sound very convincing, but without any of the above in writing, it's false advertising. Make this Northland Real Estate Group have its important details in writing for the group and any future property owners of this parcel of land. This real estate group must make these changes before you approve this non-senior complex. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. Cicelo. And we have read your letter, and so I'm going to ask our attorney, because you've had a lot of things that you said we ought not to do. There are some things we can, and there are some things around the law that we cannot. So you want us to tell them to change their name. We're not in charge of their branding. Mr. Jamnik, do we have any authority to tell them what their name is supposed to be?
No, Mayor.
We have none. It's a business transaction. Ours is only about land use and zoning, and that's what we're here to do. Also, Ms. Garros, is this the third time, reiteration in the last 3 or 4 years, that we have seen this project from one development group? And I think this is the second time or third time that Northland has brought the project forward.
Summer of 18.
Pardon me?
Started in the summer of 18. The first
The
public hearing.
15, 16, and 18.
Yeah, and no, it's before that because we had a different developer.
Oh,
Yeah,
those ones.
there was a different developer before, and this is the second developer.
Mayor, council members, the first time that we met just with the church was back in 2015.
Yeah,
That's for a sketch plan. I believe that you have probably seen, an iteration of this type of plan probably 5 times.
Yeah, and we've had meetings because one of the concerns that our residents on Crystal Lake are so concerned about is the park, concerned about the shoreline. And so all of that from those meetings have been addressed.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay. So these are the kinds of things, so it's not that it's overnight. We have been working. We've listened to our residents from the Crystal Lake Association who was here during the first hearing, and that was the first developer, and also with this developer. I'm happy because, to say that they didn't go through the park, because I was opposed to that. The park is a public park, and to pull their utilities through the park is, I don't think, was a good idea. So they continue to work and have done it the way that we wanted them to do it, and that's to pull it down and go down Maple Island Road?
Yes.
Yes. Which is what we suggested to them at the very beginning, but that was the other developer. And we were, at the time, reconstructing that road, and it would have been the appropriate time for them to do that then, but they didn't have the finances. That's why I want to make sure that in the contract, they hit all of the markers. Okay. Deb will share with you when it says staff, there's a whole lot of people, including the attorney. Can you talk about the way that we do development review and all of the people? Because even in the conditions, fire is involved. So please let Mrs. Cicelo know when we say staff, who all is included in that development review committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For all development reviews, we have a development review committee that is involved in reviewing all land use and zoning applications. That development review committee is set up with one person from every department at the city that's involved in any type of review. That would include the planners, our economic development coordinator, the police, fire department, natural resources, city engineer, trying to think of building official, and fire. So staff is referring to
That whole
the
group.
entire, yes, the entire group.
And we also, the first time, Mrs. Sislo, the Department of Natural Resources also weighed in on the application. Okay. So we try to cover everything, and we listen to our residents and try to understand all of those things. But for us, our attorney tells us what authority we have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great.
But thank you for coming in and sharing. And I just wanted you to know that some of the issues that you were concerned about, you know, I'm confident that the contract, and you heard me ask the question, if they don't hit those goals and the dates, then the contract becomes null and void.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, City Council. Thank you, Madam.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Sisler. Okay, Council, do you have other questions for Ms. Garros?
I don't think this is
Yeah,
an
okay.
easily
Yeah.
answered question, Deb, but when I was watching back the planning
Councilmember
commission,
Workman.
thank you, the planning commission meeting, I think the bigger concern here is that if the church sells, that the potential for another big project to go up next to this one exists. I think that's probably the bigger concern. This doesn't look hardly anything like it did when we saw it at planning, because you guys have done so much work on this and come so far. We can't predict the future on what that site's gonna look like if that church were to go away. But just given the density of this project and what would be left, it would be difficult to duplicate a project of this size right next to it with just the parking and everything else that would be required with it. And I'm not asking you to say that could never happen, but it would be a challenge to do something like this right next to it.
Mayor, council members, and Councilmember Workman, the reason that I did not get into this at the planning commission level is because anyone can make an application for anything at any time.
Yeah.
You would, as the city council, you do have
speculate.
provisions in your ordinance that allow for density increases, provided certain things are done with the development, and it's ultimately the city council's decision. That probably the north part of the property is, if the church were taken down, would probably have a little bit better development opportunity because there's just more flat area than the
Than
lot
the
two.
south.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to speculate.
Of course, but I wanted to give some acknowledgement to that concern, and I agree, it would be tough to do something like this twice on one spot, but I don't know what the development culture is on putting two buildings of that size, you know, right next to each other, if that's even something that anybody would be even interested in, and that all assumes that the church doesn't persevere, and then by all accounts, it looks like they're doing fine. So I just wanted to give some acknowledgement to those concerns and air them out. I have no other questions.
Any other comments? With that, I will entertain, and I need 4 votes for this. What we're asked to do is to approve the rezoning, the preliminary and final plat, the concept and development stage PUD, the variance, and the CUP, and we're asked to adopt the findings of fact, the development contract, the PUD agreement, and the ordinance. Councilmember Keeley.
Question for the developer.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, can you hang on just a moment?
Sure.
Do you want to come here and give us your name and address for the record, please? Okay. because I just had one person who signed up for this item, but,
Yeah, my name is Mike Young. I live at 361 Maple Island Road in Burnsville.
okay.
At the Planning Commission meeting of October 18th, 2018, Connie Morrison, a former mayor of Burnsville and a member of the Grace Methodist Church, stated the following: "We are just trying to cut down on the terrible expense, that bill that we have when we had a fire." And for people who don't know, this fire occurred back in July of 2003. It was set by an arsonist who broke in.
Yep,
In early January of 2020, the United Methodist Church stated that it is looking at splitting the church due to LGBTQ issues. The following is from an article of the Tampa Bay Times published on January 2nd of this year. The plan announced Friday through the church's news service would allow congregations that lean toward the church's traditionalist stance to spin off into a new denomination, taking $25 million from the denomination and keeping their local church properties. And just for clarification, that $25 million isn't for each congregation. That's a sum total to be split amongst whoever decides to go that direction. This proposal would have to be approved at a meeting of the church's governing body called the General Conference, scheduled for May 2020 in Minneapolis. At the Planning Commission meeting last week, Burnsville resident Kurt Endesfit raised the concern of the church eventually vacating the property due to financial issues. He asked a question of the city regarding the density of the property as mixed use. In the 2040 comprehensive plan, it states for mixed use 15 to 30 units per acre. If you take 6.1 acres and you multiply it by 30, you get 183 units. In other words, an additional 83 units that could be built beyond the current 100-unit four-story development. At the same Planning Commission meeting last week, there was a discussion on transit-oriented development zoning ordinance. The person who spoke on this issue noted that up to 80 units per acre is allowed for this type of zoning. So if Maple Island Road were to receive the transit-oriented development designation, the church's property could expand up to 488 units. The way the city is playing loose with the 2040 comprehensive plan does not give one comfort that a future designation from mixed use to transit-oriented development is not possible. Apple Valley, Lakeville, and Prior Lake have not, nor are they planning to build mixed-use developments in the middle of an open space park. And that held true for Burnsville until this project. And for Crystal Lake, Lake Marion, Orchard Lake, and Prior Lake, no mixed-use zoning exists, either on the lakeshore or one lot removed, until this project. It was also mentioned in the past by city staff that this property was being brought up to current standards regarding zoning, as this property came into existence before the city of Burnsville existed, and a single-family residential was how this property was zoned at that time. This conformed with the rest of the properties around Crystal Lake, and it still does. So its current zoning is not out of the ordinary, it is the ordinary. It fits with the surrounding open space park and the neighborhoods of Crystal Lake. Taking a look at places of worship, I counted 25 such properties in Burnsville, of which 60%, the majority, 15 of them, are low-density residential zoning. Next on the list is business zoning with 6 places of worship, which constitutes 24%. There are only 2 places of worship located in mixed-use zoning. Why is Burnsville bending over backwards to rezone the property from low-density residential to mixed use and not the other 15 properties that I have identified? In fact, River Hills United Methodist Church is also zoned low-density residential. In Northland Real Estate's 100-unit 4-story development, it belongs in locations that are already identified as mixed use in the 2040 comprehensive plan. What you are doing, allowing this project to go forward, is to flush the 2040 comprehensive plan down the toilet and make up rules as you go. I wonder why the city has taken such a great interest in rezoning this land, which lies in the middle of an open space park, from low density to mixed use. And I have a question, I think, for the attorney here. Sir, to make a restriction on the property so that it would stay 55, a senior living type place, wouldn't that have to be something, a restriction put in the deed to run with the land?
Mr. Jamnik?
Mayor and Council, that is correct.
So by not having anything legally, they can do pretty much what they want, and if Northland decides to sell a year from now or whatever, they're not gonna be holding this forever. Somebody else can change what they wanna do with that property.
So what you're suggesting is that we ask the developer to put it in the deed?
Not the developer, it would be the owner of the property that would put that in. Because they would be asking that this remains as a restriction on the use of the land.
On the selling of the land?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Mayor,
Mr. Jamnik?
I believe you're both correct. My
Yeah.
understanding is the developer intends to do that, which would be the owner of the property.
Yeah.
As
So
long
that's
as I can-
something that we can do legally so that it can restrict it.
Okay,
Okay.
but I hope you take the rest of the things I
Yeah.
stated tonight as well as the
Yeah.
documentation. Did you look at that, Madam Mayor?
Which documentation?
Well,
is
the stuff I wrote for the planning commission a
Oh,
week
yes,
ago.
yes, I did.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and the other part that you spoke to, which I think gives us a time right now to take a look at the rest of that property that belongs to United Methodist and what they intend to do with that. But if we can take a look at that and really make sure that we protect the environment, because for me, it's part of it is protecting the environment in that whole area.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ennisbet. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council and staff as well. My name is Kurt Ennisbet. I live at 850 Bluebell Bay Road on Crystal Lake, and I have lived there for 36 years. And I want to give the current council and staff some history of what happened on Crystal Lake. When I came to the lake in 1983-4, the lake was in bad shape. In about the mid-'80s to late '80s, we came to the city and said, can you help us get this lake improved because of all the runoff that was going? We were at the top, everything runs down from Crystal Lake. And your response to us was, you find us the money and we'll spend it. So the Crystal Lake Improvement Association called other cities, Bloomington, Minnetonka, White Bear Lake. How do you raise your money to do these dredgings and do this stuff that needs to be done in these ponds? They said, because all the runoff comes from the streets and the roofs and of all the citizens, we put a tax on the water bill. We came back to the city, and that's what the city did. And we have raised many, 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 and the city has spent many, many millions of dollars on not only Crystal Lake, but all of the watersheds here in Burnsville. And due to that fact, we have taken Crystal Lake off of the impaired waters list just last year. I never expected that to happen within my lifetime. So then about another 10 years down the road, the mayor and the council and the staff came to our lake association and said, we need help. We need a shoreland ordinance that coordinates with the DNR and helps everybody and protects the water bodies. So we went to Crystal Lake, Keller Lake, Alley Magnet, Twin Ponds, Early Lake, Sunset Ponds, and a partnership with the city. And we worked and we worked and we worked on this.
The city hall was filled with everybody.
Yep. And we gave notices about public hearings to everybody on all of those bodies of water multiple times because we had multiple public hearings, including we gave it to the church. And the church was included in that. So what I ask are two things. please do not give them a variance that you will not give to the residents on that bluff. Make them back off the required 30 feet, and that's what we did as a partnership with the city. Those ordinances were put in play to protect that lake, so we do not go back. And so that setback, I want it to be 30 feet instead of 20 feet. And the second thing is, please require them to put in 55 and older. We do not need a whole bunch of kids running around there, guys. Come on, help us out. We're paying the taxes here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis, but is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Yes, and this is the developer. Please come forward, give us your name, address for the record.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thanks again for your time and consideration. And I know, there are a few comments here, and from a snapshot, not being involved in this project for 2+ years, it might seem like we're about to make a decision and it seems whimsical, but it's been about 2 years. And prior to this, I evaluated 3 other potential projects that were proposed here. And with the dozens of meetings that we've had, and staff has been phenomenal to work with, what you have in front of you today truly is a collaborative result. This isn't me pushing. If it was me pushing, could it have been different? Yes, but this has been truly a collaborative result. From a view perspective of the lake, if we were all to think, what are the most valuable units on the lake? It's the ones that can see right over it. And if you look from the lake, you're looking lengthwise versus widthwise on the building. And that's by design. We could have had that building jog to the north, and that would have been more impactful from a view shed standpoint. Those trees are just as high as our building. Not to mention, I don't know the exact footage off the bluff from the lake, but if you're on the main body of water, it's going to be very difficult to see that building because of the setback, because there's 70+ feet going down to the lake and we're set back, 100 yards. So not to mention we're built into the side and overshadowed by Buck Hill. So what we're trying to do here is fill an unmet need. We've analyzed Burnsville, and there is truly an unmet need for quality housing for active adults. So we've always envisioned the site to be senior focused. In the beginning, it had higher acuity. There was a neighboring project that went up quicker than ours, and we adapted and actually feel that this is a better use for the site anyways, given its direct access to the trail system. So these are folks that predominantly are retired, and they want to be out, they want to be active, and they want to be immersed in a beautiful setting. And I grew up on a lake. I love the lake. I'd want to protect it at any cost, and that is the same sentiment that we have here. Currently, the runoff going into the lake is 100%. So it's not captured, it's not treated, there are no systems in place. After we are done, we're gonna capture 90% of the rain or snow events. So we capture, we treat, we infiltrate. So, and we went above and beyond the requirements that the city put in front of us, just to mandate that. Currently, there's erosion going off the side. I walked around down below on the trail system, you can see it eroding. Our goal is to stop that. The second was the septic tank. It is dangerously close to the lake. We're gonna get it out of there before it fails, because imminently it will fail at some point. We, as you had mentioned, we collaboratively worked to ultimately agree to a reroute of the sewer lines. And, we truly worked together. There was grant funding that will be mutually beneficial, where we'll be able to complete an incomplete trail loop for the public. It's not just serving us, that's for the public. So, not to mention, we're putting a lot back on the tax roll that currently is not on the tax roll. So, you know, to assist with some of these tax dollars, I guarantee you, we're gonna be paying our fair share. We're excited to create a new, attractive housing option for folks that no longer can or want to maintain a home anymore. It's real easy for someone to say that lives on the lake, that owns a lake, that shouldn't change the lake shore, but what I'm trying to do and what we're all trying to do is create that option for those folks that currently don't have it. And what a beautiful setting to be in, to wake up to every day, and why not share that with other people and allow them to experience it as well. So that's our goal.
It was asked that, would you put language into that it's, the development is for 55 and older?
Before I speak to that, I'd have to consult with my attorney. I've never remembered any project that I've worked on where I've been asked that, and actually had conversations, you know, with cities on this, where they say frankly that they legally can't mandate. So I'm gonna have to go back and look at that, but I can't agree to that now. But it's our complete goal to keep this 55 plus. Coswell's our architect, is one of the best architects in the city, and their focus is senior housing. So that's why we had them here. That's why we're designing these larger units. We have other projects where we're doing traditional market rate, non-age restricted, and I'm going smaller units. These larger units, I mean, I'm losing money if I'm going towards a market rate environment without age restricted, because frankly, they just don't need them. If you have the small families, traditionally the small families are living in the single family homes. These larger units are for folks that are leaving their single family home and not used to living in 800 square feet or less. That's why we have an extra bedroom. That's why we have a den. It's for an office or for the kids, not for 5 extra people. But it's to create attractive housing options for folks that are downsizing, and to create a unique living experience so they stay in your community. Otherwise, what we're seeing is they leave the community and go somewhere else. So we feel it's a beautiful site. Again, staff has been great to work with, and this has not been a quick process, and I feel truly it's a better project today, you know, based on everyone's input. So I appreciate that.
Well, I have to thank you that you rerouted the sewer lines. Because I wouldn't have voted for it, and I think you knew that. You were going to go through the park.
Yeah, well, we're glad to collaboratively work together, and I think we're at a good spot now.
Okay. I'm going to thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Are there questions for the developer? I have questions. Councilmember Keeley, I didn't see your name, so Councilmember Keeley.
Turned it back off. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question. One of the earlier drawings had a lower elevation on the lakeside with a rooftop deck. Did that get taken out in the multiple revisions of the design before it got to where we're at today?
Is it specifically just the rooftop deck portion?
Yeah, I thought it actually dropped down a level where it was 3 levels on that end for maybe a couple of units with a rooftop deck overlooking the lake type of thing.
Yeah, we you know, from that point, I think till now, we've probably gone through 50 different iterations to make this work, and we had to push and pull for parking, for setbacks, and to maintain our unit count.
Sure.
That's where it ended up.
Understand.
But we did pull it back.
I don't think I've ever seen a project with 33 conditions on it. I think 6 to 12 is more typical, and if
We had one that was really large.
Yeah, if we break 20, it's pretty rare. 33 is, I mean, I would agree with your sentiment that you have, it's taken a while. It's taken a lot of time. You've come before us over the last few years to finally get to a project that staff, the Planning Commission, has been able to live with, and you've accumulated 33 conditions to be able to get it done. I do appreciate, and I'll just repeat what I said early on, for the protection of the watershed district, I'm glad we're going to have, you know, city sewer and not septic tank anymore. I think there's a benefit to the trail. I was not aware that our trail that goes down by the lake isn't plowed all winter long, so I'm not sure why that is, but it'll be nice to get around there. There's a lot of benefits to this, and I think the comment was made by one gentleman about the need for the church to sell, and honestly, that has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the decision that I made early on in supporting this project. I don't really care. We don't get into judging the motivation of the seller. That has nothing to do with us. This is a project that I think fits well and offers a very high-end product in a position that is well off the lake, that is well out of the view of the lake. And I think you've addressed all the concerns that anybody has had, except there's still some folks that clearly have, that don't want the project to go forward for a lot of their own reasons, and I understand that. I used to live on this lake, and I have been concerned about preserving that into the lake and what that view from that park for the rest of the lake has, and I think you've done it. And so I just don't see any reason to deny this, but that's it.
Any other, for Mr. Farrell, any other questions for Mr. Farrell? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ms. Garros, and the variance that is spoken to by Mr. Ennisbet and Mr. Young. I think I'm trying to pull up the shoreland ordinance variance is, and then I want, because it's assumed that we haven't done any variances down in Crystal Lake, but I know of two homes that we, just recently, that we did variances down in that area.
Yes.
So tell me about the variance here and how it compares in terms of the homes, the single-family homes that we had to address down in Crystal Lake, right on the lake.
Yes, Madam Mayor and council members, the typical variances that you would take a look at on a lakeshore single-family lot usually relate to setbacks to the ordinary high water mark.
Yep.
This site doesn't have that because it's hundreds of feet from
Away.
the lake.
Yep.
So
From
it's
the ordinary
different.
high water.
Also, I don't know if there are any additional bluff areas that have not been developed yet on the lake shore. So if you have someone that wants to come in and do something, they do need to address the standards, just like this applicant. If not, they can apply for a variance. They can also apply for a PUD. Those things are available for everyone. In this case with the bluff, this is one of the few that I have worked on in my 15 years here, just because we don't have a lot of land that meets the shoreline definition of bluff. The most bluff area we have that meets that definition is along the Minnesota River, and it's land that's already owned by the city for the most part, so we're not usually seeing development towards that. Some of the earlier plans showed the building encroaching out into the city park, which
I did not
many
like.
people, were not for that. In this case, when they made application earlier, actually the building did encroach into and over even the top of bluff. So they have worked to move the building back and to modify the design, shrinking the width, and now you just have these 4 areas that are red. Those are the only encroachments into that setback. And the maximum is 10 feet. Most of them aren't 10 feet, but the maximum is 10, and that's why we included that 10-foot variance. But the only encroachment are these 4 red areas of the building. So it's kind of like points of a building as opposed to the whole building encroaching.
And so you all have worked very hard with the developer to address those concerns that came out of all of the other 5 reiterations that we saw, and that was before, whether that was at a work session or before the planning commission and then to us. So this has really been shrunk down. So I just wanted to make sure that we're addressing that we do variances, whether they're single family on the lake and not. It is very important that we keep our lake, our water bodies clean. And I was very much a part of that whole initiative that first of all cleaned up our water bodies, got Early Lake off the impaired waters list, and now the Crystal Lake last year was very difficult to do. But I believe that the citizens of Burnsville care very much about our water bodies, those who live on the water bodies and those who do not live on the water bodies. So we're all working together to ensure our environment, because we have a sustainability plan that speaks to that, and we also included in that is the pristine of our water, and also our drinking water. So a lot of those things are included. So I see that you have addressed that with the developer. I just wanted to mention the variances, and that a lot of work has been done with this. So Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you. Actually, I have to point out something, and we've had a lot of variances over the last 13 years I've been on council come to us on Crystal Lake. And many of us, I'm not saying I'm by myself, many of us have been extremely flexible and supportive of granting those variances to allow people who own property on the lake to make the kind of lake home that they wanted and envisioned. And they were running into constant problems with our shoreline ordinance and our restrictions. And I've been a pretty tireless advocate of getting those to be supported and approved to allow a person to basically use their property. I can't, turn around and say, well, because this isn't a single-family home, I'm not going to be more open-minded to them. I think I have to be consistent with a property owner, whether they're a property owner being a developer buying some property that is set back significantly far from the lake, and the people who own property that go right up to the water. So this has been a constant need for some variance of some sort. And I've been very, very supportive of helping individual property owners to be able to do what they want to do to build their dream home on the lake and or modify the dream home on the lake. So I'm glad you brought that up, Madam Mayor. I think it's a big point. I'm not changing color because of this project. I'm still going to be the same as I am if any one of these folks in the room that are objecting to this project came up and needed some variance help.
Okay. Are there any other questions for staff, Mr. Farrell or anybody else? Are you ready to make a motion, council members? And I need 4 votes.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Councilmember Keeley makes the motion, second by Councilmember Gustafson. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. I think what we've done is to work very closely, and I think our attorney having some discussion with regard to the deed and to see where that is. And I know, Mr. Farrell, you will have a conversation with your attorney and also with the church. So as we continue to move forward, the other thing that I think we need to do with the members of the church, perhaps our staff can have a conversation about your future and what all of that is about, so that we can, in looking at it into the future, and so whatever that may look like for you. Yeah. And so we can all work together. Thank you. Yeah. The next item is the ordinance amending Title III, Chapter 1, intoxicating liquor, and a 3.2% malt liquor to streamline the licensing process and the miscellaneous housekeeping updates. Who is presenting this? Okay, you didn't put your name down, Mrs. Collins. So I'm saying, who's?
A little back and forth on
Yeah. Okay. Mrs. Collins is presenting this ordinance amendment this evening. Mrs. Collins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. The proposed amendments are intended to streamline the liquor licensing process, removing steps in the current application process that were not statutorily required or that could be performed administratively. The amendments are outlined in your background. Some of the examples of these changes are eliminate specific license categories, remove the 3/4 mile separation restriction, remove the freestanding building requirement, eliminate the need for an annual public hearing for renewal license, administrative approval for changes in ownership, corporate officers, partnerships, etc. Eliminates the residency requirement for the owners to live within 75 miles of the city. Removes language that is redundant from state law. Your background also included some feedback from our local off-sale business owners, and I believe some of them are in the evening, here to address you this evening. I stand for any questions.
Any questions for Mrs. Collins? Thank you. I think the first person who wishes to speak on this item, Mr. Haltman, please come forward.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is David Haltman. I'm with Red Lion Liquors at 12400 Nicollet Avenue. I want to thank you for the opportunity, Madam Mayor, Councilman, staff, for letting me speak. I have some concerns and thoughts on this. I've been up here before when there has been ordinance changes, and the deregulation of this industry is really an important item in my mind. This is an industry that is controlled at 3 levels of government: federal, state, and local. I understand and agree with some of the free market ideas for businesses, but you can't lump that all together. The alcohol is a specific industry that can affect people who don't use it. There's laws of alcohol. There's for the age factor for how old you have to be. It was 21 back in the 50s and 60s. It went down to 18 in the mid-70s and then back up at the late 70s, early 80s. It went back up to 21. People have to be responsible when they use this product. It is an item that, like I said, it can affect other people. You know, there's laws about the amount of alcohol you can drink and drive a car. That's a good regulation to have. It's a very important regulation to have. We don't want that to go away. We don't want to, and even the reducing of the alcohol level in one system was a good move to do. The part about alcohol being controlled substance, what we have to look forward to in the very near future is recreational marijuana. That's going to come in, and it's going to come in, and it's, if approved, it will be just like when alcohol came out of prohibition. When they made that legal again, it was highly regulated because they were worried about this mind-altering product. This isn't bread. This isn't the local hardware store or anything. This is alcohol. This is something that controls people's lives. You know, we go into liquor stores and you see how they operate, and you may be in a liquor store for 10 minutes, you know, buying whatever product you might see. But what you don't see is what's behind the scenes, the training that our employees have, the responsibilities that the owners and the management have, because there's people that will come in just for a recreational use, but there's other people that come in and they need the product. They have to have the product. It can be a demon in their life, and we really have to take that into consideration. It's an extremely responsible position we put ourselves in when we decide we want to get into this industry. I've been in this industry for 40+ years. I've seen multiple changes in Burnsville regarding alcohol, but after every change has been made, they still realize, you have still realized that, you know, this is not just another commodity. This is a controlled substance that we do have to deal with. So I am afraid of the saturation that I've seen in other communities surrounding us. Egan, St. Louis Park, Chanhassen, Bloomington. We have 2 other stores. We're in Bloomington and South Minneapolis. Minneapolis is pretty strict. They have geo restrictions, and they do a pretty good job. We all do a pretty good job because of the ownership responsibility in what they're undertaking. In Burnsville, we have the freestanding building. I've always said and believe that when you have a freestanding building, it's easier to patrol within our store and outside of our store because a lot can happen outside the store. I worry about strip malls, because there's, there's cars for different businesses there. And the owner of that liquor store inside, he can't keep an eye on what's going on within these big massive parking lots when the strip malls are involved. We are, I get nervous here when I have to talk like this, but it is our mission to distribute this product in a very responsible manner. The deregulation has been happening at different levels in different states, and where wine and beer has gone into grocery stores, or the 3-2 beer and the strong, 3-2 going away. Well, 3-2 is not going to go away. And actually, it's gaining momentum in other portions. They're called FMBs. They're flavored malt beverages, like the White Claws that we see out there now. There's White Claw 70s, very, very popular. That's 3-2, so that's still growing. The 3-2 area is still growing. So I wouldn't be changing, and this is an argument that we're gonna have at the state level. I wouldn't believe that this is gonna happen this year or next year or ever for that matter. We just don't know. So I wouldn't like to see the city of Burnsville change ordinances in anticipation of the state changing their laws. When you saturate a market, you look at Bloomington, you look at Egan, you look at these other communities with very little restrictions, you have businesses that are just barely staying above water. It's hard for them to survive. They have, we have in this industry, we have to pay for our alcohol, our beer and wine within 30 days. If we do not pay those bills, we cannot buy from any other wholesaler. Nobody can sell us product. Well, if we can't buy product, we can't do business. And if we can't do business, we can't pay our bills. What happens with a lot of people, what I have seen and what I've heard is, people when they're desperate because their businesses are failing, they may not abide by all the regulations imposed on them. They have, it's like if this guy's intoxicated, I really need to make the sale. I really need to make my payments. Or if this kid's 21 years old, maybe 20, he looks, I'm going to take, they may take risks. Desperate people do desperate things. I have, back to the geo restrictions, I think that's a good idea. It does not saturate the market. We have pawn shops in Burnsville. We only have 2, but there's a geo restriction on those. That's a good thing, Pawn shops, you wouldn't want to see those on every corner, neither would you want to have liquor stores on every corner. One woman was talking tonight about the building, about not wanting to have a lot of kids running around the trails and seeing beer bottles. See how often you hear about beer or alcohol, was this involved in this, was it involved in that, You hear about accidents on the roadway, domestic violence, and they'll always point out, was alcohol or drugs involved? This is a commodity that has to be regulated. In my personal view, it has to be regulated. I'd hate to see that go away. I'd hate to see things just deteriorate. Burnsville has got great regulations. When we reinvested into the heart of the city, we had thought, is this going to be a good thing to do? And there was rules and there's codes and regulations, what made the heart of the city what it is today. This big, all the buildings going up, everything looks nice down there. It's because of regulations. It's because of codes. I don't believe that we need to deregulate alcohol or other things to make our community less beautiful, less safe. Regulation is a good thing. Over-regulation, You know, on some things, yes, you know, that might be a problem, but with alcohol, I wouldn't change a thing on it. I think Burnsville's community, the way it's set up here, it works well. And nobody seems to be complaining that it's over, there's too much regulation on it. So when you have when you have regulation like this, you can have a positive business environment where businesses are more able to succeed. And when businesses can succeed, they can do other things. And what I do with Red Lion, I am pretty deeply involved in community events. I sponsor 4 big events every year. And Burnsville Uncorked, which you've probably heard of, the Burnsville Fire Muster, I do a craft beer tasting. And that had been so successful that 5 years ago I brought in the 360 community and we started charging people, or just making a suggested donation, which helps out the 360 communities. I help a mom's, excuse me, I help a mom's program. And these people all count on us because, you know, as we all do budgets, you know, we're looking at where our funding is coming from. Well, when you have an environment where businesses are able to donate and help out, you know, it's just a good mix. It's good community involvement. If markets get saturated, you know, I've been doing this, excuse me, with these charity events for about 18 years now, and these people count on me, and I will continue to do so as long as I can. But you know, when things get saturated and business goes down, and we start to struggle, things are going to they're going to dry up. I'll do as much as I always can, but I know all these liquor store owners have their own charities that they, excuse me, that they donate to. So I don't think it's wise to change this environment. I think it works well for us. I don't know where the change is coming from, but that's my thought on this whole.
So, listening very carefully to you, Mr. Haltman, you want to retain the geodistance.
Yes.
Quarter mile. And
Three-quarter mile.
Three-quarter mile, yeah. And everything that, and just listening to everything that you said, the other thing I was listening carefully to is you want to retain the freestanding building requirement.
Yes, you know, that's a smart idea. It's a smart idea. The owners of those properties have a bigger investment into it. And if owners have bigger investment, they're going to be more in tune with day-to-day operations and the success of their business.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to take chances. They're going to, you know, it's...
Well, because the reason I'm just listening very closely, because when we changed the ordinance for the Burnsville Shopping Center area, we made sure that there was a boundary so that there everybody can, and we did it because we wanted Costco.
Yes.
And
yes, and
and
the first one of the first changes, yes.
Yes. And then Haskell's came in, well, MGM was always there, and then Haskell's came in, and then, of course, Total Wine. And I don't know if Blue Max is within that boundary.
Correct.
So you're okay with the boundaries because you were part of that conversation.
And we were.
But and because it was a mile, the geodistance was a mile before, and all of you agreed to a three-quarter mile distance. And so I'm hearing you say that you want to retain that distance outside of the shopping center area.
Yes. The reason it went from a mile to three-quarter mile, because there was a store that wasn't compliant. It was within a mile, so that's why they changed that.
Yeah.
If you look at the change that was done by the Burnsville Center Retail District, nobody new came after Total, and that was just a big box player. Everybody else, the only new liquor license that came up there were Target, Cub Foods, and the grocery store to the west.
Byerly's.
Or to the east, yes.
Byerly's.
And those people were already had their footprint up there. Nobody else has gone up there because they look at the saturation up there, and that just wouldn't be a wise business decision to go up there, and they look at what they pay for the square footage, and they would look at the competition and look at not just the competition, the amount of stores up there, and they go, you know, that's not a good business decision. I wouldn't do that. And I don't think, you know, in this outside the retail area, we've had 2 properties change hands. Both in the Perriers bought
Yeah.
Burnsville Liquor Outlet, and then Blue Max just sold. Now, these people have bought has bought these businesses, and they pay more for having this freestanding building because it just costs more than being, renting 1,100 feet out of a strip mall. So I don't think change would be necessary for the ordinance at all. I think we have an ordinance that works. The people here that are in business are running good businesses. They've been successful. They donate to their communities. We don't have the problems that Egan has. I think Egan has 24 licenses, and what I had heard, that 14 were for sale. Well, businesses are good. They're not going to be for sale. People are struggling out there. So that's a big concern when you saturate, when you deregulate, a market.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Thank you. At least I know what it is you're asking for.
Yeah.
One, retain the geodistance, a 3/4 mile. And the other is to retain the freestanding building outside of the County Road 42, the shopping center area.
I did have a question on one of these. On page 2, the issuance of licenses, it says on sale A intoxicating liquor license. On sale A intoxicating liquor license shall be granted to restaurants, including brew pubs, bowling alleys, centers, and exclusive liquor stores. How can an exclusive liquor store have an on sale license? We're only allowed to pour a half ounce. So I'm not understanding the wording on that.
Okay, Mr. Jamnik?
Trying to find it.
Page 2, right under definition types.
Yeah. And it's, yeah,
Yeah,
it's page 2, ordinance number page 2, under definitions. And it's number,
It's 313,
yeah.
yeah.
and it's the very first one.
Yeah, I mean, it's like mayor and council and David, it's current language in the city code, it's in the current code. It's probably something in the amendments that I should have deleted as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you have your answer, so that's going to be deleted because,
Well, mayor and council,
Yeah.
what I'd recommend doing is, on some of these, just to make sure we don't have unintended consequences, that I put it in for a future amendment rather than make a change now on the fly and research whether or not we had a situation where we had a combination store or establishment or those types of things. I mean, this is
combination store of selling food and a liquor store selling food products?
it's not uncommon for,
Wow, I've never heard that.
most commonly was done in municipal liquor stores in smaller
Yeah.
towns where you would
towns.
have an off-sale
Yeah.
wing and an on-sale bar, and the clerk would shuttle back and forth from the two areas.
Yeah, because
Happens in
right
Wisconsin a
now,
lot, I'm not sure if it's allowed.
Happens in northern Minnesota all the time.
yeah, because
Yeah, it's
right
very
now,
common.
there's a strict wall, a strict wall from, you
That's a
know,
state.
and that's per the state regulation.
Yes.
For like Costco or Cub or,
Yeah.
you can't, they have to have their own entrance, their own checkout and all of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's a good catch.
Well, and I just kind of, before you vote on an amendment to an ordinance, I just feel that you really should know the business and know the
Yeah.
exact language of it. Like I said, when you come in the store, you just see these smiling faces that hopefully they recognize your face and they rate you and everything. But what you don't see is what's going on behind the scenes, how important it is to the employees and the owners and the managers, the responsibility that they have to distribute this product. So like I said, Burnsville's got a good thing. It supports this industry, it supports its business owners, and things are working well. It's not broken. I don't think, the old saying, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So it's just a concern when things, you just hate to see what unintended things could come out of this down the road that none of us saw here.
Okay,
So,
but thank you for the catch.
yeah. No
But-
problem.
Yeah, but we understand your, what you're talking about.
Okay.
You want to make sure that we retain the geodistance and the single
Freestanding building.
freestanding buildings.
Yeah, and even the wording of the liquor license, I can't find it in here. I still think it should be an exclusive liquor license for strong beer, liquor, and wine in a exclusive liquor
Yeah,
store.
off sale.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep. I think that's important to have that there as well.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you
Okay.
for your time.
Yep. John Perrier? Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is John Perrier. My brother and I opened a store a little over 2 years here. I've been a Burnsville resident for about 16 years. One of the reasons we came, it was the freestanding building, and we put a lot of investment into the building.
And
It
you're
was-
over by Valley Natural Foods.
Yep, by Valley Natural Foods. One of the things I don't think a lot of people understand is, we're told who we can hire, who we can't hire, when we can do business, when we can't do business, how we pay our bills, when we pay our bills. It's a highly regulated type of business, and it's good. That's what a lot of people need to have in their lives and stuff like that. So when we looked at this location, it was with the thing of the radius, the 3/4 mile. It was the freestanding building. We have stores in other cities, and it's hectic when you're in a mall type of setting, regulating, looking for cars, who's in cars if they're, younger. One of the things, we look at as we want to be part of this city. We're heavily involved with a larger nonprofit charity that's based in Burnsville. We have been for many years. One of the things I think people need to realize is that, our job is to bring a service to the city that's meeting people's needs. And if we want to do that, then we need a partnership for both of us. So.
Well, I thank you that you're a resident of the community, but you also decided to also have a business in the community since you have businesses in other community.
Yep.
But 2 years ago, you also chose to do this, and you chose because of the geodistance and because of the freestanding building.
And like I said, the major investments we put into this building, it's substantial. And for you guys to change things, it puts us kind of on not a level playing field with other people who want to come in afterwards.
Okay.
So.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Kopp? Oh, Miss Kopp, yeah. Mrs. Kopp, yes. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Copp's home with the kids.
Yeah. Good for you, yay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Madam Mayor, council members, staff. My name is Jamie Kopp. I live at 1000 Lakota Lane. I have lived in the city my whole life.
Born and bred.
Yes. I've bought 2 homes in this city. I also work with my father. I co-own Crosstown Liquor with him. Co-owned it for about 2 years now. I wanted to point out that we're here and we're talking about alcohol, and I know it's already been talked about that alcohol is a drug and a controlled substance. And I think it's easy to forget these rules and regulations because alcohol is so socially acceptable. You go to parties, someone offers you a glass of wine, everything, people joke about it, games, you have a beer, it's not, nobody looks the other way at you like, oh, you had a beer today?
but we forget the consequences of alcohol, where us owners and managers see it on a daily basis. We see what the drug does to people. We see what negative effects it really has. Alcohol affects people in different ways. Yes, it can make you happy. It also is a depressant. And it also can cause a lot of anger and violence. We daily deal with people in those situations. And by getting rid of the 3/4 of a mile rule, my biggest concern also as a citizen is what is that going to do to the community? Because now you've opened up all these other locations that this drug is available. And if you look where our store is located, on County Road 5 in Burnsville Parkway, we have, technically, if you go from 13 to Southcross, there are 7 different locations that can sell, whether if it's 3, 2, or full. And if you get rid of this, how many more people are going to come in? Do you really need alcohol every 0.3 miles in your city? My other concern is for the minors. You send a minor into our store and they stick out like a sore thumb. Our staff is trained to keep an eye on any young people, any activity in parking lots. And the fact that getting rid of 3/4 means that they'll have more options, more places. If they go to a gas station, they don't stick out like a sore thumb. They're just getting a pop while they steal a bottle or use a fake ID. Where everyone that we have hired has been through training through the city that we appreciate that you guys provide. So I know it's socially acceptable and you think nothing of it, but if you're really in the industry, you can really tell what it does to people. Also, like it was brought up about cannabis. Cannabis eventually will come to Minnesota. And I hope that the city isn't planning on putting it on every corner, that there will be restrictions just like alcohol. And cannabis technically has less side effects than alcohol. It doesn't make people angry or violent. It makes you more calm. It's still a drug, yet it's not as socially acceptable. And people look different at that. Like you think of cannabis, you're like, wait, we need to restrict this. But why don't you have that same opinion of alcohol? And as far as ownership and freestanding buildings outside the 42 district, I agree. When you own something, when you own that freestanding building, you have that investment. You have your heart and soul into that business. And if you lose that ownership in Minnesota of the 75 mile, they're not having their heart and soul into it. It's just a number. It's just they threw some money, they're an investor, they just want to see the profit on paper. They don't care about all the little things that us owners here today do. You say one of your things is you belong here. That's the city thing. Why should that be any different for business owners? Why should we open it up to let some guy from New York or wherever come in and open a liquor store and just have it run and not have anything really invested besides his money into it? If you want people to belong here, they should be from here. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Thank you. Mr. Hiller.
Nice job, Amy. Hi, Council, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Scott Hilla. I own Crosstown Liquor, 2000 West Burnsville Parkway. That's the address of the liquor store. I also live in Burnsville, and I am bred here.
Yeah.
It was back in '58.
Yeah.
Actually, Burnsville
Born and
Lumber.
bred.
Burnsville Lumber. My dad incorporated Burnsville Lumber on my birthday, which was in April of '58. We'll just leave it at that. So, you know, I've been part of Burnsville. My heritage has been. We know a lot about Burnsville. I could tell you stories, but we ain't got time for that. I'm gonna just reiterate some of the stuff that's already been talked about. I'm not gonna touch deep depth of things, but just my concerns are what Harpo said and, the other people from the other liquor stores, just reiterating that and just saying that, you need to look at that, an example, I just write notes down there, a strip mall, a couple of people brought up the point, versus the freestanding building. And it is a strong thing that you might not see, but we do. We've got the cameras outside. We can see the cars out there. We see a car full of kids and you see one person come in. And these are things that happen on a monthly or weekly basis. There's a kid out there, they send in the 21-year-old. And then we go out and ask for IDs for the people in the car. And we'll deny that person the sale. They're sending in the 21-year-old, I'm sorry, you got a bunch of minors in the car. You go somewhere else. We're not going to sell to you. Because we're responsible for what we're trying to do. We're not just letting, they might be 20-year-olds and then there's one 21-year-old, so he's going to buy for everybody. And there's examples, you're not going to get that in a strip mall situation at all. Or a gas station, if you're doing the 3-2 thing, which I heard they pulled from that, at least for tonight, which was a good choice or whatever. I think it's premature. What you're trying to balance is free enterprise. Do you want free enterprise or do you want, safety? And you're, hey, I'm for free enterprise. And like Harpo says, we're not selling widgets. We're selling things that control people, and it's, it's worse than cannabis, as I'm hearing. The safety issue versus free enterprise. And it's your job as city council to look over the Burnsville and say, what ordinances should we do to make it safe? We worry about a bike trail and whether the car should be on the outside or the inside of the lane that we just, it seemed like an hour plus on that subject, but whatever. Just, I'm saying here we're worried about the safety of a biker, but we don't care about the safety. It's not that you don't care, but it's like, well, we just look, it's okay. We just have liquor stores everywhere. It's okay because we want free enterprise. And it is a different thing. And city council, you have to be responsible for that. You're the one who's going to either have it or not happen, because you're going to vote it in or you're going to vote it down, or you're going to pass it and say, let's just sit on this. We'll leave it the way it is, and we'll address this. Harpo and I joked about this. We've been at this subject pretty much our whole life. It goes back into the 70s that we've hit these issues, and it's been a good thing that it's been happening. And there's private people out there that are being helped by that, So I covered that. Events, and I was up here a few weeks ago getting some award for something, whatever. Anyway, but because of the events and that we help the community. My family has helped the community a tremendous amount. I did a little hairline. I did about this much for helping the community compared to what my father has done or my family has done. You know what I mean? We've done a tremendous amount in the community, and so by having us being part of the community and ownership and being here, I think that's really compelling to, we're also giving help to, whatever organizations that we're helping, and I just want to reiterate that you're not going to get that. You're not going to get the community, Burnsville, being helped. I'll throw this out. Does Total Wine, how much does they help the community on a day-to-day basis? Or, down in the the community, the people themselves. So I wanted to bring that up. I'm for the same thing Harpo was saying about Mayor, you were iterating the, freestanding, keep the license, off sale, the language that you were discussing. I just want to say that I'm, beating that same drum or whatever, so. And that's about it.
Okay. So it appears to me that you all are all right with the amendments with regard to the public hearing and the initial application and licensing. You all are okay with all of that. The thing that I'm just hearing all of you talk about is to retain the geodistance and also the freestanding building. but you're okay with, making sure, well, removing where the owner of the establishment needs to live 75 miles away. You can live.
I could give up with that, yeah.
Yeah,
That's me.
you
I
can
can
live.
speak for myself.
Yeah.
I'm not speaking for, I'm not here
Yeah, so
representing them, so.
yeah, but all of you all live, because you all live in the city or,
Yeah.
or in Apple Valley or Rosemount. But you're okay with all of the amendments to clean up? A lot of this is something, streamlining the process for all of you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing that I'm hearing from all of you this evening is retain the geodistance, retain the freestanding building, but the rest of it, except for what Mr. Haltman identified.
Item 313.
Yes. And that, our attorney has that, and that's going to come back.
Correct.
Yeah, Mr.
Exclusive
Haltman.
liquor store language.
Thank you. That was the one where, with the on sale.
Yes.
In the language.
Yeah.
But also, item 3 on the first page of the agenda report, this amendment eliminates specific individual license categories. That should stay.
Oh, okay.
That should stay. That's important. That's where it is, liquor license is granted to an exclusive liquor store for strong beer, wine, and liquor. That should stay.
Mayor-
Okay.
Mayor, if I
Yeah.
could address
Is-
that.
Am I reading that right?
Mr. Jamnick?
Mayor and council, I don't think Mr. Holtman's reading it correctly in the sense that the laundry list A through M, the legislature frequently adds categories of licensure under state statute. And this is just intended to be that if the state adds a N through Z, that the city doesn't have to review and adopt it. This council can issue a license for it. So it just takes out the list. It doesn't change anything substantive.
But we'll still comply with state law.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, but is that written in because of maybe the impending 3-2 beer going away and strong beer? So a liquor license for a liquor store is going to be different than a 3-2 license or
Yeah,
a
well-
brew pub license?
We don't know that because the legislature hasn't acted.
Right.
That's correct.
So
And
that's
so-
why I wouldn't want to change any wording in the way the current,
Yeah.
the way the current
That's
ordinance
not in
reads.
here.
No.
And so we will address that once the legislature acts, and that's to Mr. Jamnick's point. Whatever that is, we will comply with state statute.
Okay. Okay.
But right now,
Yep.
we don't know anything about it, and until they act, it doesn't make sense for us to do that.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
just two things that you're okay with all of the other amendments?
I think so. You know, I don't know. I got this yesterday. I got this last night and I just started reading through it and I know there's, I don't know if I have missed anything. There probably is something I missed, but the most important thing is I just fear the change of a system that has been in place that is working well.
Okay.
It's not broken, so I don't know why we
would?
should change.
Okay.
What benefit?
Yeah, Mr. Perrier, please come to the,
I guess I'm trying to figure out what benefit the city gains with somebody who lives in New Jersey owning your liquor license. Do they pay taxes for their,
yeah, they pay taxes.
but are they living in the city? Are they living close?
No.
Are they spending money in the city?
No, they have
Did they-
employees.
Did they, I stood here 5 years ago and Total came in and Trone said, we did almost $1.5 billion and I gave away over $1 million to charity. And my flyover math, that's not even 1%.
Okay.
It's just a thought, we do more than that.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be interesting
Yeah.
to see some of that money stay here.
Okay. And we like that. And for me personally, I love that I see all of you involved in the community. So I really thank you for that. You're involved in the events, you're involved with nonprofits, you help. You're engaged.
It's a little, our average employee, part-time, has been with us almost 9 years in our stores. You know, we have employees who live in Burnsville.
Yeah.
And we want to keep them. You know, our turnover rate's very low.
Okay.
So, just a thought.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you. Okay. Okay, it appears to me, members of the council, they're okay with all of the changes except for 2.
Well, Mayor and Council,
Yeah.
and basically both of those are encompassed, as Mr. Holtman indicated, in 313,
Yeah.
paragraph E.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the, Councilmember Gustafson.
Well, I was just gonna say, if we have this 75 mile thing, how does a Costco or a Total Wine get a license?
Ms. Mascoli?
Madam Mayor and council members, I don't know that that's a provision that we've ever, we've
Enforced.
recently vetted or
It's
enforced.
in there, but we don't enforce it.
Yeah.
So therefore, that's why you want to eliminate, because we're trying to eliminate things we just don't do anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's correct, and there is a provision on page 6, 31812, dealing with corporations, partnerships, and associations for managers on site or designated managers. So it is a outdated provision that was carried over and just seemed to be difficult to administer and enforce anyway, so.
So we should get rid of it.
Yeah.
That was the logic.
All right,
Yeah.
I get it.
Okay, Councilmembers at Keeley.
I have been a pretty vocal proponent of free market principles and rules apply to everybody, that no business is afforded government protection. I have espoused that opinion when we've talked about liquor license over the last 13 years. I had a great conversation with one of the owners represented in the audience. And recently in the discussion, and I think I may have brought it up, of the potential of us having to take up recreational marijuana. And I thought to myself, okay, if we're going to open this up and let everybody play by the same rules, no matter what kind of business they're in, then we have to do the same for marijuana shops if they're going to come to Burnsville and we as a council decide to allow them in, if the state does pass a law and legalizes recreational. And that, of course, makes a person pause and think, because everyone's, your comments are spot on. There are social impacts, but they're not as great as alcohol. And yet, in theory, today, in all the states that have passed recreational marijuana that I have studied, I haven't found a single one that has allowed them to be in the same positions, Main Street, call it, as liquor stores. So it's being excessively regulated and driven primarily out of fear. I mean, it's never been legal before, well, at least in modern times. But so it caused me to really think about this, and I think the other thing is I'm not going to change my feeling. One day I believe that's going to these restrictions should go away, but I do believe there's some mitigating factors that don't force us to make the decision today, or don't put upon us the rationale to make the decision today. Number one, some people in their current businesses have made investments that aren't that dated, and so we should afford them some respect out of the investment they made. And number two, the state is considering, strong beer in grocery stores, getting rid of that are going to have some impact on the business. And so I don't have a problem taking out 313 for the time being, and moving forward with everything else that's in this proposed amendment. I don't think the freestanding building should stay, quite frankly. I think if we're gonna keep this, the 3/4 mile separation, I don't think freestanding building is a requirement, but, I can go either way on that. To me, that's less of a factor than the 3/4 mile separation. But, I would be willing to set aside for the time being in anticipation of state law changes potentially coming and potentially decisions that are similar in nature because it's a controlled substance with legalized marijuana potentially coming to us, and removing number 313 provision out of this amendment and moving forward with the balance.
Okay. Councilmember Gustafson.
I'd agree with Councilmember Keeley, although I think in the 313, I would want to change that language at least so that we're compliant, whatever license the state issues, we issue. Isn't that part of that here?
No,
Am I
the
reading that
313 is
wrong?
only the geo distance
Oh,
and
okay.
the freestanding buildings.
Okay.
In bold, basically.
Yeah, okay, well, it's 313E is what you're talking about, not 313 as a whole.
No, yeah, 313 E.
Yeah, I was looking
Sorry.
at all of 313.
Yeah, sorry.
There was a lot
I
more
didn't
to
have
it than
that.
So-
So I was right.
I apologize.
So,
Right.
and
Yeah,
you're okay with
313E, I'm fine with taking out,
retaining
but the
it?
other language, I think, just for streamlining purposes, so that we can just, whatever licenses we're allowed to by the state issue, we can just issue.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to keep coming back to us.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilmember Schultz?
Let's see, I would be outvoted for this. I feel awful that businesses up until this point have had to incur costs that they shouldn't have had to incur. I understand the pain of a city making you put in extra costs, such as having a freestanding building, such as being restricted on the possible locations that you could have. I also think that two wrongs don't make a right. And continuing with something that would, if someone else wanted to come in, that they would then have to incur those costs as well, to me is compounding a longstanding error, and I'm sorry that happened. I also don't think it is, while I have a huge amount of appreciation for the support and also the fact that you've been longstanding businesses, you are obviously extremely conscientious, responsible citizens, extremely involved, just pretty much everything you could ask for a business. I don't, I mean, I would include all of it, including 313E. I do understand the difficulty, but I also don't think that it is a city government's role to protect businesses from competition. And I'm also pretty interested to find out what other businesses we have a geo restriction on. Pawn shops were mentioned. I would love to know what those businesses are. I think it's awful that we treat businesses unfairly or unfavorably. There was a mention of pawn shops. We have a sitting city councilor who works for a pawn shop, and I find nothing immoral or disreputable about that industry. So I do want to be clear about that. However, if my fellow city councilors do want to remove that section, I'm game.
Anyone else?
Button.
Yep. Councilmember Workman?
I have struggled with this since, well, last month, because all of you are good people, and have made investments in this community and continue to do that. And that's where I think my struggle comes in, because I kind of echo what Councilmember Schultz says. I don't think I wish that those provisions weren't here that put you in those positions in the first place, because then we wouldn't be here talking about this. When I look at the provisions, I don't see any major issues with the residency requirement. I think with Costco and Total Wine, I know there's some workarounds in our code that allowed for that, and we're not really enforcing it, so I'm okay with removing that. And then as this discussion took place, I look at freestanding building or geospacing, and I think if one of those were to go away, but not both, we're relaxing, but not caving. I don't know what the right word is for that, but I would be comfortable removing one, but not both of those. But if the wish is to get to the state and see what their decision is with grocery stores, I would be okay reacting to whatever happens there. If Cub and these other stores are allowed to sell wine and beer, then that changes this conversation with freestanding and really geospacing, because I don't know if that would supersede local authority or not. So I'm comfortable kicking the can on E to see what the state does, and it sounds like they might be acting on that this session. So I would maybe unofficially second Councilmember Keeley's.
So we'll retain 313E.
Yeah, but I want to see what the state decides to do on, I'm calling it grocery store beer, but if.
Oh, the 3 too strong?
Yeah, if they allow the sale of wine and beer within grocery stores and gas stations, then this whole conversation changes, and I don't know if preemption exists in that scenario or not, because I don't.
We don't have the language.
Okay. So I want to thank you all for coming in and speaking, because you're the ones who are in the industry, and you know the great things about the industry and things that are not so good about the industry, and you spoke to it this evening. I believe that when this ordinance was put in place by the mayor and council then back years ago, it was looking at not to saturate the community, because there was one time when there was a gas station in every corner. And what they're looking at is that how do we maintain the public safety? You talk about a substance that's regulated, and it has consequences. And you can either hurt yourself if you've imbibed too much, or also kill someone else. And we see that. So there is a reason why this particular product is regulated. And I appreciate that you all care about that, and that you send your employees to be trained and to understand the consequences and what the ramifications are going to be. You know, one of the things that I continue to look at is not only the economic piece of it, but also the health and welfare. Vaping, anybody can buy tobacco anywhere, and now we see the unintended consequences of something like that, and what it has done to people. So I look at that and I say, right now, you all are in the industry, and you're saying to us, keep the geospacing at 3/4 of a mile, and keep the freestanding building. Right now, you're saying it works. Anybody else who wants to come into the community and can meet those standards, they can. Within the shopping center area, there are places where they can, other liquor stores can go. They can go into the shopping center, they can have a freestanding building close to Buck Hill, there's open spaces there, but no one has come in. So first, I want to thank you for your diligence and thank you for caring about the community and that you take time to make sure that you have cameras outside of your building so you too can help the police. Because one of the things they say, we all have to be conscientious about the health and safety of our community. So thank you for that. And I agree that we should keep the geospacing and the freestanding building, and that will continue to work with you as we go along, because it is a controlled substance, and it is a substance that has hurt people, not only killing the driver who is intoxicated or someone else. So it is a product that has a mind-altering consequence, and it can impair one's behavior. And so I like what we have, and you said that it's working, and you're okay with it. So we're ready to make a vote. You don't need to come up, Scott. I think you're okay.
It's the family.
Yeah.
It's a family that hurts, not just killing this
Yeah.
person or you're hurting yourself. Alcohol hurts the family,
Yeah.
the spouse, the kids, whatever.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So what I'm hearing is that everything else that we're amending is okay, except for the 3/4 mile, pardon?
E.
Yeah, 313E, to retain 313E. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
There is a motion by Councilmember Gustafson.
Second.
And a second by Councilmember Keeley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And it passes. Thank you so much. And thank you for your contributions to the city. I really appreciate that you're engaged and you continue to give back. Thank you. Okay.
I know.
What did I do?
Of course you do.
We can do this fast.
Members of the council, I will now recess the Burnsville City Council meeting so the Economic Development Authority meeting can convene. President Gustafson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to call to order the Economic Development Authority. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on. Our next item is election of officers, and I need a motion for what we want to do this year.
Would make a motion,
Commissioner Schultz?
motion to adopt the slate, which would be a continuation of last year's slate.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. We have a first and a second. Any other?
I want a title next year.
Okay. Well, then let's vote on it. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Nay. And the slate remains the same. We'll move on to the consent agenda. That's something we can do in one vote.
It's okay.
Approving the minutes of our last meeting in December. I need a motion on that.
Motion to approve.
Commissioner Schultz?
Second.
Commissioner Keeley? All in favor?
Aye.
The consent agenda passes. On to our regular agenda, and that's the Development Tool Policy Update.
Can we get the presentation again? I forgot, it's been so long.
Do you want to say anything, or do you want us just to vote on it? Would you like to vote on it, commissioners?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Yeah,
the
second.
development-
Commissioner Keeley, motions, second
Yeah.
by Commissioner Couch. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and it passes. Our next is the adoption of the 2019 Annual EDA Report. Ms. Collins?
Sorry, I'm busy typing. Let me grab my report real quick here.
See, I forgot to look at the
Two more
slate.
minutes
I would have
before we
said
hit
you,
Three and a half
you
hour
as
mark.
I
treasurer.
thought you read your background.
Thank you,
I read
President
my, but I
Gustafson.
didn't go back to look at the slate.
I just wanted to let you know that we do have, I did put it in a little bit different format this year. And in your background, you did have a list of all the items that were approved in the 2019 year for the EDA. And did you have any questions Otherwise, it's just the annual report to adopt.
Are there any questions, commissioners?
No?
Good. We go
Seeing
with
none,
that.
I'll call for a motion.
Move to adopt the annual report.
Commissioner Couts moves.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Schultz. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No miscellaneous, so our next move is on to adjournment. I need a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion adjourned by
Second.
Commissioner Keeley, second by Commissioner Schultz. All in favor?
Aye.
And we'll move it back to the meeting. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I will now reconvene the Burnsville City Council meeting, and members of the council, there are no other items to come before us this evening, and a motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
There's a motion
Second.
and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Good night, and thank you for being with us.